back with Generation 2, looking at every single route in Pokemon and painting pictures of its ecology. We have quite the slew of Pokemon living together on these routes, but how does the circle of life work on them? Who eats who? How do they contribute to the land around them? And how do they affect each other overall? Howdy there, I'm Acrylic, and I pulled my data from Gold, Silver, and Crystal version of games, putting Crystal at the forefront primarily, as we will be going over the entire Johto region and its ecology. And just like last time, we are going to be laying down some ground rules to keep this as realistic as possible, while still being true to the Pokemon franchise, the games, and everything themselves, to kind of make everything make sense properly. We'll be mostly removing human interaction from the world. We want naturally acting Pokemon in their natural environments. We are studying ecology, the relationship between Pokemon and each other, or Pokemon and their environment. This also means that places like the Safari Zone will not be included, and a number of Pokemon that you would expect to see in this world are not naturally found, so they are not included in this. I'm sorry to our starters, you don't have a natural spawn point anywhere. But don't worry, a lot of different Pokemon do come up naturally on routes in future editions of regions, and trust me, as long as these videos keep doing well, I love doing them, it's only an encouragement. So, to add to it, we will also be considering water and rock smash encounters, but we will only include Pokemon within the level range of the natural wandering or grass encounters. That means we're not going to be using a Super Rod for a level 40 Lantern on Route 3, even though Route 3 is in Kanto. I decided not to use Pokemon Heart Gold or Soul Silver as my primary source, as they had some Pokemon from later generations, and it would take away from the original intended ecosystem that was created in the first place. We will primarily base this, as I stated, on the Pokemon Crystal game and supplement our info with Pokedex info from the anime. Of course, I will use some Heart Gold, Soul Silver info, and anything else. If we decided to consider the anime fully, then it would actually bog things down. Routes are different, Pokemon encounters are different, and it would cause a lot of problems. Lastly, for organizational purposes, we are going to be traveling through Johto, route by route by route, and going through any caves, forests, or otherwise along the way. This time though, I am going to be omitting like berries and apricorns and mushrooms and all that stuff, because those should just naturally be encountered, or they just don't really add anything, and again, they bog things down. I'm trying to streamline this process just a little bit, and in addition to helping streamline the process, I am going to assume that you, my dear viewer, have already watched my Kanto Ecology video. If you haven't, go watch it. It's the first one of this series, and it's gonna help you. Otherwise, by assuming that you've already watched it, what's gonna happen is I'm going to, let's say I touch on Rattata. I'm not going to tell you every little bitty detail about Rattata that's relevant to the ecology. Instead, I'm just going to move forward and say what it does or doesn't eat, and, you know, when I'm painting the pictures, it will be included. So, you won't get background info on Rattata as you would in the Kanto region edition, but it will be included. And now, as if it wasn't difficult enough to try and figure all this out, we have a day and night cycle to work with, and that makes it incredibly difficult because Game Freak decided that they really wanted to flex their muscles on that one, and we have Pokemon that are nocturnal and Pokemon that are around during the day or even in the morning, and they have split percentage encounters, and those percentages are really used as a form of guideline. They are not perfectly strict. So, once again, I will go over the Pokemon in the area during the daytime, then at night, followed by the Pokemon that are seen at all times of the 24-hour clock. And I'll go over the important details for each of the new Pokemon as we meet them, and then paint you a realistic picture of each route before moving on to the next one. So let's begin with the geography of the region, as I quote and get a lot of my information from, starting with Bulbapedia. The Johto region, like its neighboring region Kanto, has a temperate climate. However, Johto's climate is a bit wetter than that of Kanto's. Johto is notably more rural than the Kanto region, which leans more towards the urban side. The region has an abundance of water to the west and south, with Cyanwood City most likely being on a separate landmass. However, Johto is still dominated by land. The western parts of the region are mainly low-lying and forested and contain most of the region's population. Johto's ultra-modern Goldenrod City is found in the heart of the region, on the coast. It is the technological, industrial, and economic area of the Johto region. Due to its centralized position in the region, many smaller but important cities and towns connect to the city. There is one large mountain range encompassing almost the entire eastern half of the region, which separates Kanto and Johto and contains Mount Silver. Blackthorn City is nestled deep between the mountains and is very unique because it is a city for dragon tamers. Route 29, a road that begins a journey. The road smells like freshly cut grass. In the daytime, we find Rattata, Pidgey, Hoppip, and Sentret. We know that Pidgey's evolutions eat fish and other small mammals, so it can be assumed that they would be taught to hunt other Pokemon such as Rattata. And because I had some people argue that, oh, maybe Pidgey doesn't eat Rattata, I'm going to put it this way to you. Birds are going to teach each other how to hunt to some degree. You know, it depends on the bird, of course, but with Pidgey and Pidgeotto does eat Rattata. If it does teach Pidgey how to hunt, Pidgey's gonna hunt Rattata. And if your argument is that Rattata is too big for Pidgey, yes, I understand that they are different weights, but when we look at everything, Pidgey, Rattata, and Caterpie are the same size. Pidgey can still be argued to hunt Caterpie. If your argument is that they are too large, I want you to understand that Pidgey weighs less than Caterpie. Pidgey comes in at 4 pounds while Caterpie comes in at 6.4 pounds. So if your argument is that it is too big, then that means Pidgey should never even try to hunt Caterpie. The difference here, though, is that it is going to strike at these Pokemon, and it doesn't have to carry them away. It can simply eat them right then and there to conserve energy, especially as it is a Pokemon that is not trying to feed its young, assumedly. Moving on, though, we do have Rattata, which are known to be omnivorous, as mice or rats may be, being opportunistic eaters, and then you have Hoppip here. Hoppip just gets to float around and with the breeze helplessly as it photosynthesizes. Now let's talk about Sentret though. Sentret's our new entry, alright? Known to be cautious and timid, it stands on its tail to scout its surroundings. It only sleeps when there is another Sentret keeping watch, otherwise it is too afraid to sleep alone. I just imagine them like grabbing each other, like they're both plushes for each other and just kind of, you know, that's what I imagine. But when it senses danger, it warns others by screeching and thumping its tail on the ground, and can most commonly be found in temperate grasslands. So unfortunately, they didn't really tell us about its diet, so let's try and look at some real-life inspiration. And it does have a number of real-life inspirations, oddly enough. Its behavior and markings make it more like a meerkat despite its ferret-like name. They're similar to rabbits or Japanese flying squirrels and sugar gliders thanks to their flaps. I don't really know what they're membranes. And then they have a tail that is similar to a ring-tailed ground squirrel or a raccoon. Because this is still very wishy-washy in terms of diet by looking at all of these creatures, I want to actually base its diet on ferrets, primarily. Reason being is as follows when we look at ferrets' information. The burrows also become more maze-like deeper inside, which makes it even harder to find for its nest. A mother ferret curls itself around its offspring to help them sleep. Once the offspring are older, the mother ferret will take them outside to prepare them for independence. In other words, even if we don't see ferret here, they are likely off route very close by just teaching Sentret to hunt. Or maybe they're off on their independence route already, knowing how to hunt. So we can at least confirm by looking at our information, and we look at ferret's information, which states that it would, or it does, hunt Rattata, we can safely assume Sentret will at least try to eat Rattata as a source of food, small mammals. And I would like to extend this to eating insects as well, mainly because of its real-life inspirations, looking at meerkats and everything else. At nighttime, we actually only see Rattata and Hoot Hoot. For Hoot Hoot, it is commonly found nesting in trees in temperate and boreal forests. By the way, before we get too deep into this, how about we put forests and forest types into perspective with help from worldwildlife.org. Temperate forests. Temperate forests cycle through all 4 seasons. Most forests in the US are temperate forests. Depending on the region, you can find coniferous forests full of evergreen trees that have leaves year-round. Deciduous forests with trees that shed their leaves every year, and some forests with a mix of everything. The cold winter means temperate forests don't have the variety of animal and plant life you'll find in subtropical or tropical regions, and many of the animals hibernate or migrate during the winter. Then we look at boreal forests. At the other extreme is the boreal forest. Boreal forests are still full of life that's adapted to withstand frigid temperatures year-round, such as caribou reindeer, or animals that can migrate long distances every winter. Full of deciduous trees and conifers, boreal forests cover vast expanses in Canada, Alaska, and Russia. Boreal forests are also an important carbon sink. Like all forests, they absorb carbon dioxide, a main contributor to global warming and climate change, removing it from the atmosphere and helping to keep the entire planet healthy. Back to Hoot Hoot, though. It is nocturnal, sleeping in holes carved in tree trunks during the day, and while grubbin is in a different generation, it is stated that it feeds on grubbin. This tells us at minimum it eats bugs. But I wasn't satisfied there. I'm never satisfied with just being like, oh, it just eats this. Oh, look at this. No, I want to dig deeper. That's the purpose of all of this, right? So if we look at Hoot Hoot, we do see that it and Noctowl are drawing inspiration from the horned owl, more specifically the Eurasian eagle owl. And Hoot Hoot's behavior of standing on one leg at any given time, this is really cute, was inspired by Ken Sugimori's childhood pet bird, who had shown a similar behavior, which I feel like I've seen a lot of birds that kind of just, one leg up and just exist like that. But we're not done. We're not done. Let's support it even further. I want evidence upon evidence upon evidence to shut down arguments because it's fun. But if you do have arguments, that's always fun too. Now, from National Parks Service, we have owls are well-adapted predators. Owls eat mice, voles, shrews, rats, squirrels, lemmings, grasshoppers, fish, snake, birds, skunks, rabbits, insects, spiders, scorpions, reptiles, and even other owls. Some scientists estimate that one owl would eat 2,000 rodents a year. This makes Rattata a prime meal for Hoot Hoot to eat. Your dinner is served. Now, this also means we have to consider a lot of different foodstuffs or meals, prey that Hoot Hoot and Noctowl will do anything and everything to try to eat. I am going to assume that because it says other owls, I mean, yes, it probably could be of the same species. I'm going to assume that Hoot Hoot and Noctowl don't try to eat each other. Now, we're technically not done yet. While Headbutt is not a move that we have just yet, the level difference of Headbutt versus normal grass encounters is very negligible. Plus, in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, they changed it so that way you can Headbutt basically immediately out the bats and get more encounters of roughly the same Pokemon at the same level. So, long story short, and Headbutt gave me a huge headache, not a pun intended, we will be including Headbutt encounters, but they will not be included as part of the day or night cycle necessarily. I'm going to try and keep it as best as I can. And honestly, at the same time, those same encounters are very consistent throughout the entire game. So I'm going to mention them here and understand the Headbutt encounters are almost the exact same. Maybe take away a few Pokemon and then put them right back, depending on the routes, for every single route. So that would just bog us down and give us the same information over and over again. So I'm just going to mention it here. Especially as a lot of Headbutt encounters are just Pokemon that are sleeping and you are disturbing them. That's why they have a high chance of battle or a low chance of battle as stated. So currently hiding away in the trees, we have Spearow and Hoot Hoot. And then quite a few cast of new characters. Starting with execute. Oh my goodness. Gathering in swarms of 6, they communicate telepathically in a way only they understand. If ever one disappears, they replace it with a similarly sized Pokemon. Hey, yo, Daddy! What's going on? Get over here! You're one of the eggs now! Otherwise, if it doesn't do this, it just gets very timid, nervous, cowardly, and so on and so forth. Pidgeotto, specifically Pidgeotto, not Pidgey, interestingly enough, are natural predators, which it chases off with its psychokinesis. It inhabits jungles and forests, and they're eggs or egg-like, so we can assume kind of any egg-eating Pokemon may try to eat them despite their strange grass typing, again, because they are actually seeds. I don't know why it took me so long to remember the word seeds. It doesn't mean that these Pokemon that are hunting down execute are successful, especially as, like, is able to chase off Pidgeotto with its psychokinesis. That tells us that execute has a lot of power to it. And we will also, with fair assumption, assume that execute does not always succeed in chasing off its foes either. I mean, sometimes Pokemon sneak up on you. What can you do? I will say, though, I got a pretty good laugh because when looking at the Japanese direct translation of its name, it translates or can be translated into the words unexpected and egg. And that just blurs the line so much more. Up next, though, we do have Ladybug, social and living in large groups. Once again, another one that, if left alone, is too afraid to move around. Who would have guessed that, all the prey like to live in large groups to stay safe from all the different predators in the area? Kind of like how zebras stay together so that way they can confuse their predators with their patterns. I think there's more to that, though. I swear, like, 6 years ago, there was something that, like, they revealed. Oh, hey, there's more to this. I'm not going to look it up right now. Maybe I'll put it on screen. Back to Ladybug, though. It is very sensitive to cold, adding to why they stay together for warmth, sleeping in groups of 4. It uses aromatic fluid from its feet for communication. The smells even indicate their emotional state, such as sour if it's angry. It pollinates fruit-producing plants, builds its nest on leaves in temperate forests and jungles, and bands together with other ladybug to protect their home. So, whether it's based on, like, actual ladybugs or Asian beetles, we have kind of a strange one here, because it seems to actually feed off of nectar, potentially, especially as aphids just assumedly don't exist here, which is what, you have ladybugs that eat. But, according to Planet Natural, ladybugs feed on a wide variety of small insects and insect eggs. Their food is aphids, but they also eat small spiders, mealybugs, and other insects and mites they can attack and subdue. But they also state, I should probably stop saying but so much. Yeah, put a counter to, a little counter. Someone in the comments is gonna do it. There are some species that feed on pollen and nectar, and other species like the Mexican bean beetle, Epilacna varivistis, feed on plant parts like the stems. Now, I did see some claims that all ladybugs can eat nectar but don't survive on it, but I couldn't find anything that felt super reliable to direct quote here, so take what I have stated overall with a grain of salt. And as we shift over to look at the Asian lady beetles, they actually have roughly the same diet. But because of ladybug's behavior, actually, before I forget, Asian lady beetles, they are ladybugs to my knowledge. Like, they are ladybugs. They're not exactly a cousin of them. I saw some claims of that, and that, again, grain of salt. It gets weird when you're trying to find things, especially when you're looking at, like, me being in America and looking at foreign species makes it harder for me, because sometimes it's translations, sometimes it's other stuff, and it's just people that, like, they call you know what they call a gopher? You know what? Let's take a tangent. You know what they call a gopher? What's a gopher to you? I'm going to give you 3 seconds to type out your comments. Just put your comments in a thread for your own comment. Keep responding to your own comments. But a gopher is either a lizard that digs, an actual gopher, a mole, or again, any creature that digs that is small and digs into the ground. There are people who have called ground squirrels gophers, and that's why we use Latin, because people keep calling the freaking Florida lynx when it's actually a bobcat. I get a little heated. I get a little heated over things not being called what they are when I have to do research. Let's just put it that way, and let's get back to the subject at hand. Because of Ladybug's behavior, I am going to claim that it focuses on feeding on nectar as its primary food source, and there is a potential that it also eats fruit, since for some reason it focuses on pollinating fruit-bearing plants rather than plants in general. And as another small tangent, according to I'm pretty sure that's supposed to say naturemuseum.org, butterflies will eat a variety of fruits. We like to feed them bananas, apples, and pears. We poke each piece of fruit many times to make it nice and juicy and give space for butterflies to stick their proboscises. Basically, I brought that up because it shows that insects that do pollinate and might feed on nectar will also still feed upon fruit, probably because of the sugars, which, in addition, Lewis Ginter Botanical Garden states butterflies will sit on rotten fruit, sucking for a long period of time to get all the nutrients they need for flying, feeding, and reproducing. So there's our actual answer, and we can support Ladybug as a pollinating insect surviving on pollen, nectar, and fruit. And since it is a ladybug here, I am sure it has many, many, many predators, which explains why it is desperate to stay in groups same as execute. Speaking of predators, we have Spinnerack, which it was one of my favorites when I was really little. Like, I don't know what it was. I just like the smiley face on it. Now, Spinnerack is nocturnal and lives in temperate and tropical forests. Tropical forests are described by World Wildlife as outside of a zoo where you can find rhinos, tigers, elephants, and orangutans all in one place, the tropical rainforests of Borneo and Sumatra. Tropical forests are biodiversity wonderlands. You'll find more different kinds of plants and animals in these types of forests than anywhere else on Earth, with year-round temperatures above 65 degrees Fahrenheit and plenty of water. Just about any creature can thrive here. National Geographic, anybody, if you want to sponsor me, if you want to pull me on for a voice, that'd be a dream. I would love to do a documentary voiceover. Anywho, Spinnerack creates webs that can withstand stones set on them and acts as nets for fishermen. It is incredibly patient, waiting days for prey. Sensing vibrations when prey is caught in its web, it then strikes. But what it'll do, instead of striking right away, it waits until it's under the cover of darkness. Though its poison is not strong, it can still weaken any prey that it catches. That is when its best moment is to strike after they have been weakened, caught within the web, giving Spinnerack full advantage. By the way, it's not even a real spider. I mean, look at the number of legs. 6. The spider has 8 plus its 2 pedipalps on its face. Also say pedipalps. Pedipalps is such a fun word, pedipalps. Though it gets a pass. It gets a pass from me because it can have different patterns on its face, which is very cute. It isn't always just a little smiley face. It could be angry, sad, so on and so forth. It likely has inspiration from the Johto spider in Japan, which has similar coloring, in addition to the happy face spider from Hawaii or other similar spiders. This would include ones like the kidney garden spider. There are also jumping spiders, which have a similar stance and body shape, structure, whatever you might say, to Spinnerack, and Ceratogyrus tarantulas, which have a horn on their head as well, which I didn't know about. That's really cool. Here's the scary thing about spiders or even tarantulas, though. If they can eat it, if they can catch it, they will eat it. It's as simple as that. At least in the carnivorous sense, assuming that they can, again, actually catch it. I mean, there is literally a tarantula called the Goliath bird-eating tarantula. And according to Smithsonian Zoo, as its name suggests, this species can eat birds, and just about anything that is smaller than it is, including invertebrates and mice, frogs, lizards, and birds. at the Smithsonian's National Zoo, they eat cockroaches. I thought that was a separate quote piece. But I'm gonna take the extra liberty and say that since this is a Pokemon, they don't necessarily need to be the same size or smaller or whatever it is. They just need to justifiably be able to overpower the other Pokemon. Ugh. Let's move on to Aipom. It uses its powerful tail freely and cleverly for many purposes. It helps to have a hand at the end of it, of course. It is known to wrap its tail around tree branches, and it sleeps so it doesn't fall, or as it sleeps so it doesn't fall. Because of its excessive tail use, its arms are not nearly as dexterous, and it becomes clumsy. I mean, yeah, if I was using nothing but one arm, one leg, whatever you want to say, for my entire life because it's fun and it's more reliable, yeah, of course, the rest of your ligaments are going to be, you know, little weak little sausages, you know, whatever, makes sense. They live in high treetops of tropical, temperate, and even boreal forests, using its tail for balance as it swings from branch to branch. Now, it has inspirations from the New World monkey and the Capuchin monkey, and the New World monkey, according to University of Edinburgh, states, New World monkeys belong to two families. The family of Calatrichidae, oh my goodness, the very small marmosets, and tamarins, and the family Cebidae, I'm not really sure about that one, a diverse group of large monkeys. They have varied diets of fruit, leaves, buds, flowers, nectar, insects, spiders, frogs, snails, and lizards. They also eat saps and gum. And as we look at capuchins, according to Rainforest Alliance, we see a typical diet for capuchin monkeys includes fruit, insects, leaves, and small birds. They are particularly good at catching frogs and cracking nuts, and it is suspected that they may also feed on small mammals. Though despite this, Aipom states that its favorite food is Bonsweet, a fruit-like plant Pokemon, and has no other hard evidence of eating other meat-based creatures, not even insects. And I'm gonna say it here and now. If it is a grass-type Pokemon, depending on what it is, Pokemon like Bonsweet, Vileplume, Bellsprout, whatever, those specific examples where they are, like, distinctly a plant, a fruit, a seed, I am going to consider a Pokemon eating it to still be an herbivore. Of course, if we looked at like Grookey or Sprigatito, for example, they are grass types, but I don't think they are actual, like, made out of plants. They might be able to photosynthesize to some capacity, but otherwise they just have grass or growing abilities. I need to work on every plant Pokemon explained and plant sentience. That's a whole video I've been putting off for a while, because I've been having a lot of other good videos I really want to do. There, I will say though, at least really only one other thing that supports that it eats any other Pokemon, as it does state that it generally searches for prey atop trees. So, to be extra thorough, despite not being part of this generation, I decided to look at Ambipom, and it does state nothing about the diet. They get into territory disputes with Persimmon, and they primarily shuck their food and eat it. And they do live together with Aipom, so that we could be safely assured that they're eating the same stuff. But let's take the more realistic approach on this one, and considering there is a plethora of fruits and insects, we are, in the end, going to assume that Aipom eats insects in addition to fruits, legumes, and basically anything other than non-insect-based meat. Just to try and balance out between Pokemon and real life, and, Bonsweet is still prey. It gets weird. Let's move on. Punko, the bagworm Pokemon. It lives within its tough and heavy shell that doesn't bother it at all, actually. The spike at the top is apparently its stem, and it uses saliva-based glue it creates to stick bark to its body, getting larger and larger as it collects more. It patiently hangs from tree branches in tropical and temperate forests, waiting to prey on flying insects. It's like a small tangent. You know what my favorite bird is, or arguably one of my favorite birds of all time? The great patoo. All it does is it pretends to be a stump. It blends in great, and it waits. I love the ones that are like, I mean, the yellow-eyed ones are freaky, and they look super concerned, and they're like out of their mind. But the black-eyed ones are really cute to me and kind of evil looking. I don't know. They look more cute to me than evil. It's just completely black orbs. There's always been portrayed as something that's evil within literature, or even like, you know, look at like Supernatural for a great example, like demons and everything. But they're really cute. They're loud. They're big. I think they're like a solid 3 feet on average. I'm not 100% sure. This is all off the noggin. And what they'll do is they'll pretend to be a stump and wait for mosquitoes primarily to fly by, and then pop, and then they go back to being a stump again. Anywho, back to Pineco though. If you shake its tree while it is eating, it will drop and explode. Apparently that's the primary reason that it drops and explodes. I don't know if that actually means that it explodes like kaboom, or if it just loses all of its bark. Nevertheless, we have shrapnel that's coming off of it, which is scary. And there is some potential that it's based on the Mexican jumping bean, Frijoles saltarines, which is a seed pod that has the larva of a moth in it that moves it around, very similar to how Pineco functions. And this larva will grow into a moth after enough time. And I thought, you know, the jumping bean thing was a joke for the longest time, but no. It's a real thing, which blew me away. I actually sat there, I was like, what? This is real? That's not just a stupid thing to say off the noggin? So no, it's not. And I will at least put here, I would love to see a regional variant of Pineco where it doesn't turn into Forretress, but instead we actually get the moth. We actually get a winged creature from Pineco. I don't know if I want it as a flying type, unless it's a steel flying type. Yeah, you know what? Make it another steel flying type. I feel like that's cool. I might as well. Lastly, for this route, we have Heracross. It throws opponents or competitors for food away from them with its big horn. Its claws can dig into the ground for sturdy footing or allow it to climb up trees. It can lift up to 100 times its own weight, which, being 119 pounds or 54 kilograms, it can lift 11,900 pounds or 5,400 kilograms. I needed to put that into perspective for myself, okay? Because you'd say random numbers. I say random numbers. It's like, okay, those are funny numbers. What does that even mean? I don't know. The brain can't really comprehend anything over, like, anything higher than 100, I think, is, like, the brain can't actually comprehend. And if you tell me that you can, you're either a super genius or lying to me, because it's not, it's not actually comprehensible. I see subscriber counts and I'm like, yeah, that's a number. I can't comprehend. You know what I mean? It's just natural. So again, we put that into perspective, and a class, or type B rather, school bus, which carries about 30 people, is what Heracross can lift. And no, to help you a little bit better, a type C school bus is like the most traditional one that you would think of, between 23.5 and 29.5 thousand pounds, and carries 72 people. Your type B school bus is probably the one that you took on a field trip with 7 or 10 people in your classroom in college to go see some rocks or something. I don't know. That's what I did at one point. Thank you, General Google searching and DCI Solution. Now, Heracross lives in boreal, temperate, and tropical forests. It competes with Pinsir for food, feeds on tree sap, and is actually kind, as it has been shown to allow Butterfree to eat after Heracross has had its meal. It's just got to make sure it eats first. Though it may go after grass Pokemon for their sap, but it is strictly stated that it does not harm them. Let's take another tangent, because I have what is a, I forget. It's like, it was called, I'm gonna be upset about it again. It was the Florida sun plant or something like that is what I bought it as. And when I asked the person, I'm like, what even is this plant? They go, oh, it's a cornstalk plant. And there was a day where sap, or like this like clear fluid, was kind of dripping off of it after a hot day. And Acrylic is a little stupid. I'm a little dumb sometimes. You were too busy, whether you should or shouldn't, or what was it? You're too busy asking yourself if you could or couldn't, instead of asking yourself if you should, or something along those lines. I'm gonna butcher Jurassic Park here, and I immediately whipped it up with my finger and tasted it. And it was sweet. It was delicious. And I'm lucky I didn't get poisoned, but it was a cornstalk plant. Well, I found out that after a hot day, it was releasing perspiration in some capacity, sweating, basically, and some nutrients and sugars come out with that. And so sap is delicious, or at least that was. I don't know if you'd consider it sap necessarily. I think it kind of is. So that's a fun little thing. I'm just looking at it. That's why I'm staring off screen right now. But back to Heracross. Dex entries also state that it sips honey and nectar. And let's take a quick inspiration, or a quick look at its inspiration, the Hercules beetle. And according to the Missouri Department of Conservation, it states, the eastern Hercules beetle, Dynastes Titius, is huge and strong. The larvae eat rotting heartwood, usually of deciduous trees, and the adults eat rotting fruits and tree sap. So, there we have it. It and its inspiration eat roughly the same stuff. We might even be able to assume Heracross does eat heartwood. And now that we have everybody on this route, let's just paint our first picture. During the day, Rattata scurry through the fieldlands, eating berries and anything else it can get its paws on. They do have some capacity to climb trees, so on occasion, they may get greedy and go after eggs of birds, pineco, and even Execute itself. The problem here is that Execute will use its psychic power to send away its enemies. In addition, if ever pineco is eating, it will drop down and explode if disturbed. This puts Rattata at risk since it might be moving in swarms. The Spearow and Pidgey fly down at the Rattata often, pecking at them and making a great meal of them. Though they too might try to hunt Execute, it is a fruitless effort. Their energy is best served hunting down other prey in the area. Other prey would include Spinarak, Sentret, and the occasional drifting Hoppip, though they might have difficulty when aiming their sights on Pineco and Heracross. This is due to Pineco releasing itself to the ground and likely exploding, in addition to Heracross being a much larger and stronger Pokemon that can fight back despite the type disadvantage. Though Apom is not on the menu, despite Pidgey being a raptor, as they are simply not large enough to really take Apom on, or fast enough at this point in time. Though Spearow may still strike at it in groups on occasion. The only other Pokemon in this area that has to worry about our birds of prey would be Sentret. Luckily, they move in herds and can keep watch in order to keep each other mostly safe. Speaking of, let's talk about Sentret and its prey. Sentret leave the nest on occasion in pairs, or if not that, in groups, as the mother sends them out after a few times accompanying them. While out and about, they have already garnered the taste for blood through first feeding them Pokemon that it has hunted. When in groups, they run into few problems outside of Rattata or Spearow swarms, as they themselves swarm after their own prey. This includes stray Rattata, any fallen Execute eggs, and unsuspecting Ladybug. Being small and young, they take naps throughout their hunting day, keeping watch for each other from any potential predators. Unfortunately, they may still get separated and attacked by not only birds, but also Spinarak. Spinarak spin their webs and wait until prey falls into them. They aren't a common encounter during the day or night, despite being nocturnal, as they hide deep within the trees here. Their prey could be any other insect Pokemon, or even the wandering Sentret or Apom. Though if Spinarak doesn't act fast, it may lose its chance at a meal, especially if they have the luck of catching a Pidgey or a Spearow. This is because their poison is not strong enough to completely kill their foe, but only weaken it to the point where they have a chance. Depending on spider to spider, but especially for small spiders such as jumping spiders like Spinarak, they will additionally feed on sap but not the entire leaf. This leaves some room for arguments on whether or not it would bother with eating Hoppip that may also float into its webs. I believe that in times of need, it will not hesitate to eat our lovely little dandelion Pokemon. In addition, it may on occasion sneak into the nests of other Pokemon and eat their eggs, though it may mistake an Execute for a tasty meal and get blown away by psychic power. Through the trees, we have Apom, swinging about and grabbing any fruits or nuts it can find. With its dexterous hands, it will also go after any of our insect Pokemon, striking quickly and then disappearing with new prey. though they don't prefer this and will only do this on occasion when their favorite foods are not available. Maybe they will make Pineco fall on occasion just for the fun of it. Many of our other Pokemon in this route live peaceful lives as long as they can stay away from their predators. Hoppip floats about through the area on rare occasions, soaking up the sun. Execute does have chlorophyll, so they partake in the sun's beautiful rays. Heracross wanders from tree to tree, finding any sap it can, all as day shifts over to night, and most of our Pokemon fall asleep. The ones that stay awake or wake up include Rattata, who scurry about in smaller numbers now, making themselves unfortunate easier prey for Spinarak that now roam throughout the tree lines, or for the now awake Hoot Hoot. Hoot Hoot can be heard throughout the forest, ticking and moving like a pendulum in place at the same time every night. This creates an area that other Pokemon know they should stay away from, but the unfortunate ones are already within the midst of Hoot Hoot's territory and are quickly snatched up for food. Hoot Hoot actively will snatch up Rattata and Spinarak, potentially even any other unwary insects that roam throughout the night or are caught while asleep. And so, we can finally close Route 29, the first route of Johto! And before we continue, if you would like to support deep research like this and other videos like this one, consider becoming a member of the channel. It goes a long way, it's $3, and if you can't, simply share the channel with your friends and continue watching videos or even joining live streams, as that also means the world to me. Doing challenges or just playing Pokemon games. I do live Pokemon research. This month I'm doing, Alien Isolation. It might have to extend it to next month because, I kind of had to skip out on streams because of life. But let's get back to the matter and continue to Route 30. A grassy path where you can battle other young trainers. Here we find our next massive slew of Pokemon. But luckily we have seen many of them before. During the day, we see Caterpie, Metapod, Weedle, Kakuna, Pidgey, Ladybug, and Hoppip. And at night, we actually see Rattata, Hoot Hoot, Zubat, and Spinarak. We will also be ignoring Headbutt encounters at this point, again, as they are pretty much exactly the same throughout the region for the most part, and Headbutt insinuates, once again, that these Pokemon are asleep or otherwise not attacking until disturbed. I feel like this would only be fair, as it would otherwise muddy up the ecosystem more in ways that would cause immense complicated issues or drag down, this video in ways that it doesn't need to be. After all, you don't need me to say Heracross eats sap and then tries not to get eaten because nothing's gonna bother it because it's very strong 300 times, now do you? Yes, I know there's not 300 routes. At least not yet. The water encounters are not considered here as they are outside the level range. So we don't really have a full picture here as things haven't changed drastically. Sure, there are more food sources for any of our Pokemon that eat insects, and with Zubat in the picture and it being a Pokemon that only drinks blood to survive, it is likely going after any Pokemon it can, so the mini picture I'll give you is as follows. During the day, Ladybug, Caterpie, and Weedle begin to roam about. Pidgey takes advantage of this as they fly in and attack for their tasty meal. Hoppip still lazily floats around like just some weird tumbleweed in the air. And the unfortunate occasional Metapod or Kakuna gets attacked as well, being easy pickings due to not being able to move. Though as the day continues, Ladybug hide away before any of the others have the chance. All before night falls. And all that is left throughout the night are now the scurrying Rattata, seeking any of the bugs that could not find safety. The Hoot Hoot also fly around, seeking these Rattata, and also Spinarak, but now Poliwag wanders out of the ponds, seeking other forms of vegetation, being another form of prey for these Pokemon. Unfortunately for Zubat, though, it is also found to be prey by Hoot Hoot. We can reliably state this as, according to AAC Wildlife Removal, the most well-known bat predators among them are the great horned owl, Bubo virginianus, tawny owls, Strix alico, and barn owls, Tyto alba. But what makes bats a staple in their diets? Well, for one thing, bats are relatively easy to catch. which would explain the low number of Zubats in the area, because that just means they're either getting hunted down to low numbers by Hoot Hoot, or they are being smart and avoiding the area. Finally, with Spinarak, if it doesn't get eaten by Hoot Hoot or gets unlucky and is attacked by Rattata, it can simply wait until any of the Pokemon fall into any of its webs that it spends the night building. Route 31, a short, nostalgic path winding through nature. Everything here is the same as before, except now we have Bellsprout at all times and Ghastly in very small numbers at night. The Bellsprout will actively go after anything it believes it can wrap itself around, but primarily seeks after any bug-type Pokemon and may find itself attacking Poliwag when it gets the chance. Outside of this, it will find itself as prey to many of our other Pokemon who wish to cut their teeth on it. This would be any of our birds, and of course any of the insects in turn who do eat plants. So it's a give and take Pokemon that is constantly hunting or is the hunter. Oh wait, no, that's supposed to be hunted. Why did I typed an R there? So, or hunting or the hunted. We're keeping that in. Meanwhile, Ghastly will float about and just envelop any Pokemon it can as it poisons them and then steals away their life. Though it may focus itself on sleeping Pokemon for an even easier meal. So how about we not talk about that route any further, fairly cut and dry, as we turn down the lights and enter Dark Cave. Though, we will have to keep in mind that we are on the Route 31 side, which does have a different ecosystem, technically, than the Route 45 side. Now, typically, when considering ecosystems, I would just pair this all as one, but they are very separated or distinctly separated by the game, so I'm just going to respect the game in this capacity. Within the Dark Cave on this side, we have Zubat and Geodude, in addition to 2 new encounters, Dunsparce being one of them. It can float slightly with its wings, though it avoids detection and flees by burrowing into the ground with its tail. It lives immobile in caves and beneath the earth as it creates maze-like nests that it can navigate without getting lost through the smell of the dirt. They get along with Diglett and share their tunnels, actually, and are primarily based on the Tsuchinoko, a yokai that is basically a hammered down snake. And the issue here is finding a diet for a yokai and actually trying to make it realistic. And I kind of was able to. Now, I've used yokai.com before, so I decided to use it again, and that was all to help me try and interpret this diet for Dunsparce. Because according to them, its diet, or at least the Tsuchinoko's diet, consists of insects, frogs, and mice, and it's also found of sake, rice wine. So we're simply going to assume Dunsparce eats the same way, which is somewhat reminiscent of a snake. Though it likely takes these creatures by surprise, otherwise they may not get a meal due to its cowardly nature and its weaker nature, ultimately. Also, it's probably not drinking sake, though that would be kind of fun. And while I was live streaming my research for this, my chat actually suggested multiple times that the idea could be Dunsparce finds plants or other flora that it could take and ferment in its own food stores underground, which this could be in turn stolen by our next subject Pokemon, Teddiursa. Makes sense that we would see the little bear here, but it's in very, very small numbers, similar to Dunsparce, meaning that in this case, while Dunsparce is just incredibly rare, as its name suggests, Teddiursa is just wandering over here. Now, Teddiursa and Ursaring both suggest that they don't eat meat and focus their diets on honey and berries. But Ursaring does at least state, it is said that there are many streams and towering trees where an Ursaring gathers food. Now again, I guess there could be a lot of like bushes or otherwise near the edges of streams because of silt layoffs for nutrients, but since it's a bear, we can assume that they would be omnivores. But let's narrow things down just a little bit for the sake of realism, knowing that they have bases in grizzly bears and Asian black bears. And according to Bear Vault, we hear, black bears are omnivores. Black bears keep to a diet of mixed calorie sources. No red meat only, vegan or keto over here. They like to mix things up. What they eat, when, is typically driven by seasonal changes and what's ripe and readily available. They follow their wild, natural surroundings and consume what's on hand. They also state, sometimes that's meat, but they also eat plants. That's what makes them omnivores. Here are some of their favorites: fish, fruit, nuts, grass, plants, honey, berries, bugs and larvae, small mammals, and leftover carcasses. Honestly, whenever I think of a bear eating, like, bugs or insects or anything like that, or even a fox for that matter, imagine them picking up, like, a stick, and it's just wriggling with plants, and they just kind of, like, you know, like, as if it's a kebab, which I don't know if that was a thing in Disney. I don't know where I got that in my head, but that's where it is. More than anything, it's important to note that black bears aren't really hunters by nature. They don't usually stalk live prey like wildcats. They spend their days using a keen sense of smell to find food that's just waiting to be eaten. We all know how legendary a bloodhound's sense of smell is. Well, a bear can smell about 7 times better than that. That's a powerful nose. Which all lines up with our bear here. Now, let's get some more info, supported by National Wildlife Federation, as they state, grizzly bears are omnivores. The most commonly eaten kind of plants are fleshy roots, fruits, berries, grasses, and forbs. If grizzly bears are on the hunt, their prey can include fish, especially salmon, rodents like ground squirrels, carrion, and hooved animals like moose, elk, caribou, and deer. So, in other words, Teddy Ursa, following in Ursa Ring's footsteps, will primarily search after berries and honey, but will supplement their diets as any other bear would with insects and other forms of meat. Which, while Magikarp is just barely out of level range for me to fully consider it as part of our analysis, I feel like it would be a sin for me not to at least mention its presence, since Teddy Ursa is likely roaming, knowing that it is in these waters. Also, before I give you a nice little picture of our dark cave, how do you feel about the extra voice that I'm doing here? I know it's not the most consistent right now, but it is what it is. At least for when I'm quoting stuff, for my auditory-only listeners, to make it a little bit easier for you when you know I have switched from, like, regular, I am talking, or reading my own script, to quoting something else in front of me. Let me know in the comments. So the dark cave is as follows. Zubat are found at all times within the cave, leaving, often in order to get their fill of blood. If they are lucky, they can swoop down on the unsuspecting Dunsparce as an incredibly rare treat. Otherwise, Dunsparce is hardly seen and disappears before others can see it. Meanwhile, Johto dominate this cave, only exiting if it must, but it likely will not have to, as there are many mossy rocks that it prefers to eat available along the edges of the water in this cave. And additionally, or finally, Teddy Ursa will occasionally wander in, away from its family, only to get attacked by a stray Zubat. This likely does not result in the death of Teddy Ursa, lucky for it, and instead it might just lose some blood and then run away. Or if it is desperate, it will take a Zubat as its meal. Route 32. A path crossed by the Magnet Train Bridge. Nature meets technology. Some old faces and some new faces are here at all times of day. We get Rattata, Ekans, Bellsprout, and a sheep to help you fall asleep, Murray. Murray, a lovely and cuddly sheep Pokemon that has a tail that glows ever brighter with the more heat and electricity it has. Unfortunately, that likely gives it away to predators in the area. Its wool continuously grows and stores electricity, rubbing together and building a static charge. The volume increases when it builds up with electricity, so it basically just fluffs out more. Touching the wool when charged results in a static shock, and in the summer the fleece is shed but grows back in a week. Air is stored in the fur to help insulate its body during all forms of weather, and Mareep also tend to avoid battles in the wild and has a mild disposition. It is most often found in grassy fields. In this area, we can suspect that Mareep will be preyed upon by Ekans. I want to note, as I did in the previous Ecology video, Pokemon like Rattata will eat anything,
but I find it unlikely that it would eat Mareep. You could argue that it could swarm and eat the poor sheep, but then what is stopping us from just saying and playing the numbers game at every single route and saying that Rattata, being a Pokemon that strikes in incredibly large swarms, if it can, just dominates the world by just sheer numbers? No. I mean, you can have swarms of a lot of different creatures. That does not mean that they are going to dominate every single area proper. They might suffocate something out just because it's eating their resources, but no. Also, mice don't hunt sheep. I am sure it would eat some Mareep leftovers, though, if something else hunted said Mareep. Now, during the daylight hours only, we do see Pidgey and Hoppip. We do get a very small percentage of a new Pokemon here during the day, but it is primarily active at night. Wooper. It is implied to be dull-witted and oblivious to its surroundings. It lives in cold water most of the time, and when sleeping, it partially buries itself in the mud at the bottom. It will occasionally leave the water when the air cools in the evening to search for food along the shore. While walking on land, it coats its body with a slimy, toxic film that keeps its skin from dehydrating and insulates against the cold. This film also causes a shooting pain if touched barehanded. It is timid and tends to stay close to Quagsire. And to note, for future routes, Arbok is a natural predator of Wooper. Interesting that Ekans is not considered a natural predator, likely because of the type disadvantage it has, though I'm sure an Ekans can occasionally swoop one up if it strays too far from its kind. Now, that brings us to a lot more questions, so why don't we look into Wooper a little bit further? What does it eat? How does it eat? So on and so forth. I mean, we know it eats something from the water and within the mud as it searches the coastlines, but what does it eat? It has characteristics reminiscent of salamanders, mud skippers, and of course axolotls. And according to Aloha Animal Hospital, we read, as amphibians, salamanders should be fed a carnivorous diet that consists of foods that they would eat in their natural habitat. This includes both land and water environments. If your pet is a land dweller, mealworms, insects, tubifex worms, crickets, and white worms should make up the bulk of its diet. For water dwellers, you'll want to feed him waterborne creatures like brine shrimp, bloodworms, and nightcrawlers. But this wasn't enough for me. I needed to sate my curiosity. So we know of one salamander that exists and is very large, and Quagsire is based on, known as the Japanese giant salamander, or in their direct translation, baked pepperfish. I like that name a lot, actually. And according to Smithsonian's National Zoo, God, we visit there so much in terms of, like, online. I love them so much. Maybe one day I can go in person. But Japanese giant salamanders are carnivorous and eat a variety of animals, including fish, insects, crayfish, snails, and small mammals. Small mammals, by the way. They have extremely slow metabolisms and can go weeks without eating if necessary. They have poor eyesight, so they rely on smell and vibrations in the water when hunting. Bumps on their skin, located mostly around their head, are actually external sensory organs that operate similarly to the lateral line system in fish. The giant salamander captures prey in its mouth, which is full of tiny teeth. In combination with the significant jaw pressure from its muscular head, prey typically cannot escape this salamander's grasp. At Smithsonian's National Zoo, Japanese giant salamanders eat fish, shrimp, earthworms, and crayfish. Which kind of lines up really well with Quagsire. I have to admit right now, bumps on its head, seems to not really care until it bumps into something, kind of can wait a very long time without eating. But I wanted to dig deeper. I want to get a little deeper than that. So I looked into sustainabledyson.org and found info on Japanese giant salamanders, which they are trying to help save and ensure the safe population of, which is pretty cool, actually. And they state, Japanese giant salamanders mostly eat freshwater crabs and fish, but they're very opportunistic. Their diet can also include frogs, snakes, small mammals, turtles, spiders, and insects. Oh my gosh, I wasn't ready to... I know I read this before, but I forgot that turtles was a part of that. And outside of the... Oh, sorry, that's me speaking. And outside of the mammals and snakes, alongside a few other small differences, axolotls and mudskippers have some very similar diets, actually. Which basically means that Hooper and Quagsire pretty much eat anything that crosses their path if they can work up the brain cells to actually catch it. Though once it's caught, there is no escape, assumedly. So they're carnivores. Our Wooper and Quagsire are carnivores. I would have never actually guessed that. I'm so used to so many very cute, loved Pokemon just being creatures that are, oh, it probably eats berries. Oh, it probably just eats some fruit. Oh, it's so happy. Look at it go. How can you not love that smile, Karen? And then it turns out that it just swallows a deer in one gulp if it could. So, this would explain why Ekans doesn't eat Wooper. It's because Wooper actually eats Ekans and pretty much any other land-dwelling Pokemon that it can get its jaws on reliably. So let's shift our focus and at least mention the other Pokemon that are here at night. This would include Rattata, Zubat, Ghastly, and Hoothoot. And so we can paint a little picture of this route. During the day, Rattata scurry about as per usual, with Pidgey in small numbers swooping down as they pass through the area for a quick meal. They both may go after Bellsprout, who in turn is just trying to prey on whatever it can. Though none of them are nearly large enough to go after Mareep, who lives happily throughout this area without much to fear. But I said much to fear. There is still something to fear. The true predator of this route, or at least it would like to think so, is Ekans, who lives in high numbers. It slithers through the grass, striking at Rattata and the unsuspecting Pidgey. It will even go after Mareep as well, assuming it doesn't get shocked by the static and it escapes. This could expand further, as if it eats the entire Mareep, it will not be able to move and will in turn be eaten by Rattata and Pidgey. It's like a turducken, but it's a Mareepekin. I don't know. All the while, as per usual, Hoppip floats about, hoping to not be eaten by Rattata or Pidgey, as again, this poor Dandelion is just helpless to everything else's whims. But as day turns to night, Ekans realizes that it is not top dog, as Wooper takes the scene. Popping out of the ground from underwater, where other creatures can't get it, a Pokemon ready to eat Rattata, Ekans, and maybe those aforementioned Magikarp with every chance it gets. Assuming, once again, it's aware of their presence. The Zubat swoop in small numbers, taking what it can from others. Bellsprout continues to move around and may take Wooper as its primary prey at night. And Mareep herd together, sleeping while standing up and away from the commotion of the nightlife, only ever having to worry about the occasional Ekans. And finally, the rare Ghastly floats in once more, taking the life of any Pokemon it wishes as a midnight snack. Next, though, we have 2 detours to get through before the next route. Starting with Union Cave. Deep underground, it's connected to the ocean. The water flows here. A total of 3 floors are also here. The first floor holds Rattata in small numbers during the day, alongside higher numbers of Sandshrew and Zubat. At night, we get less Zubat as they leave to hunt for food, and more Rattata seeking shelter. Wooper do find their way in here, thanks to the lower levels and those lower levels water connection. And finally, we get Geodude and Onix at all times. Fairly simple floor, but I want to note that previously I stated Sandshrew is more based on shrews, but it is important to note that they and Sandslash are more closely based visually on pangolins in terms of their design. Despite this, I intend to keep the original diet it had, as the pangolin diet fits as a part within, but does not include everything a shrew would eat as per its diet, as I had stated in the Kanto edition. More distinctly speaking, pangolins eat ants, termites, and larvae, meanwhile shrews will eat those, worms, snails, slugs, small animals such as salamanders, snakes, birds, mice, and other shrews, alongside plant material and carrion. In other words, shrews are pretty much eating everything, and as a ground-type Pokemon, it helps that they would be able to dig up a lot of their food that fit within these parameters, alongside use those claws to climb trees, as Sandslash will do for berries and other food. So, these Sandshrew are primarily feeding on the Rattata population here. Zubat are never really going to change and are just going to keep feeding a bit on everything, leaving the cave at night. Geodude eats its rocks, Onix continues forming the cave tunnels as it just feeds on a bit of everything and as it digs through. And Wooper comes in for shelter to kind of eat some Rattata. Gone. Luckily, it never comes in contact with Sandshrew, or rather, Sandshrew is lucky, because despite Sandshrew having a bit of a height and weight advantage, I don't think it stays in the cave at night, because Wooper would eat it. They don't have an encounter rate at night, meanwhile Wooper does. This would explain also the uptick in the Rattata population as well. There are less predators at night for Rattata, and they all gather within the cave. Now, as we go deeper in and go into B1F, basement 1 floor, I don't know how to say that otherwise, we get a shift in populations. I will note once again, percentages get very, very messy throughout all of this, so bear with me as I am using these as guidelines and putting Pokemon Crystal as the front runner for percentages and times of day in which Pokemon appear, as it gives morning, day, and night percentages. Though I have kept things primarily to day or night for simplicity if you are following along with the Bulbapedia pages. So, as per Pokemon Crystal, the Rattata population has dropped significantly at all times of day, and Sandshrew is now around at all times as well in higher numbers. Zubat makes up half the population during the day and a third at night, while Wooper still is wandering in the same numbers only at night. And Geodude and Onix have just kind of stayed the same. I mean, they're eating rocks and tunneling. What more do you want from them? No Pokemon really bothers them. So our little pecking order hasn't changed at all, but the Wooper may be getting a bit of a better meal now that Sandshrew is in the area. Then, as we get into B2F, we get a massive change. I will note, despite not having a good rod or the ability to surf, I will be considering many of our new Pokemon as part of this lovely little ecosystem connected to the ocean. We add in Raticate and Golbat, who are here all day and night. Wooper has been replaced by Quagsire now, though at night there is no Wooper, it is only Quagsire, always has been. Now with Quagsire, we've already talked about them already, but let's get into its behavior and way of hunting so we can understand its place in the ecosystem and its habits just a little bit better, how it affects its environment and other Pokemon. It is carefree and sluggish by nature, but protective towards Wooper. It is unintelligent and tends to bump its head inadvertently while swimming. Luckily, it doesn't seem to care, probably because of all that muscle in the head, and it hunts for food by leaving its mouth wide open in water and waiting for its unaware prey to blunder in. Because it doesn't move, it doesn't get very hungry, and can afford to wait for its food. It may even sleep while waiting for its food. They live in clean bodies of fresh water as well as muddy swamps, and during the day it avoids sunlight by submerging itself in the water. It is rather strange that it is on land now, but it is also in higher numbers in the water. I will hold my statement on what it eats as it creates the perfect pressure for some of the Pokemon here to evolve. Speaking of evolution though, how about we step into the water and check out our slew of Pokemon that we can talk about. Some we have talked about before and can be found at all times. Tentacool, Tentacruel, Krabby, and Magikarp. But we also have 3 new Pokemon within our natural level range, that's within our rule set that we've been keeping. Staryu, which are found in small numbers only at night. As long as its core is intact, it can regrow any lost limbs that other Pokemon eat, which it doesn't seem to care at all if those limbs are eaten. When the sun goes down, its core glows its brightest. Many will float from the seafloor to the surface and align themselves with the stars of the night sky as their core flickers, displaying a connection with the celestial bodies of space. If it becomes weak, its core will grow faint and flash slowly, and by the ends of summer, groups of them will light up together in steady rhythm. It's sometimes found in rivers that lead into the ocean, which could explain why it's found here. Sorry, I tried to hold it in, and you probably saw it for a split second, But I imagined if the Staryu were coming up and they were doing a steady rhythm of, like, you know, flashing, I'm just imagining full-on EDM music of Staryu just being there at the top of the water. Oh my goodness. I digress though, and in the Pokemon Monsters Encyclopedia and the original Japanese version of the Pokemon This Series episode, The Water Flowers of Cerulean City, that's like episode 4 or 5, Staryu is classified as hermaphroditic, meaning that it has both male and female reproductive organs. Now, I wanted to figure out what it eats, as I know some starfish will eat fish, but it seems as though Starmie will only zoom through the waters and eat plankton, which there aren't really plankton in the Pokemon world, technically speaking. I mean, I guess there are, but weird. And this might also just be because they aren't truly starfish at all, since they are said to be from space. It gets very confusing. So let's just move on. They eat plankton and nothing else, so theoretically they just get eaten and defend themselves if they're a Starmie, but not a Staryu. The last new entry of this route is at least an easy one, as we talk about Corsola. Horsea and Lovedisk are sheltered by Corsola, offering each other protection from foes. Its branches glitter very beautifully in 7 colors when they catch sunlight. And if a branch breaks off, they just grow back. Give me Mega Corsola. I know we have Galarian and Corsola never has anything. Give Corsola an evolution, give it a Mega, whatever, and let those branches glow just like Xerneas does. That would actually be incredibly cool. Either way, if the branches break off, they just grow back, and they are found in the warm, shallower waters of southern seas, and it requires clean water to live. If the habitat is dirty, the growths on its back become discolored and degenerate. But when it is healthy, its growths regularly shed and grow back, able to even regrow them over the course of a single night. They form large social groups that can become so large that people may live on top of them. But that is for the next region. We won't talk about that here. Here in this region, it doesn't have any predators normally, unless somebody gets desperate, and so we can kind of paint our picture of this final floor of Union Cave. On the floor of the water during the day, we have Corsola in small numbers, slowly making their way inside and increasing their populations. Magikarp swim around, eating whatever they can, maybe even a shed Corsola branch if it wants to, though this would be rare and unlikely, I'd say. All the while, we get Krabby scuttling about. The opportunistic omnivores they are, grabbing Magikarp, breaking Corsola when desperate for food, and even each other if necessary. Unfortunately for them all, we have Tentacool roaming about, brought in by the currents as it lazily floats through, then grabs its next victim. Though, it will leave Corsola alone and target Magikarp, maybe even Krabby if it thinks it can wrangle it and win the fight. To the victor goes the meal. But a greater threat looms as Quagsire stays immobile, waiting for these Tentacool or any others to list into its mouth. It can handle the poison of a Tentacool, though it isn't favored as a meal due to Tentacool being mostly water, so it might enjoy Magikarp more or even sink to the bottom and wait like a trap for Krabby. The pressure of Quagsire in the area causes some Tentacool to evolve into Tentacruel, becoming a rarer encounter here, but a dangerous one that will consume all with its 80 tentacles, oh goodness, and decimate the population if it gets the chance. As such, it's a struggle between it and Quagsire. On land, we get Geodude and Onix performing their usual routine, eating rocks and creating tunnels respectively at all times. A few Rattatas scurry about, but they are a bit rarer as all the pressures from the previous cave areas have lowered their numbers. The few left serve the ones that survived. Raticate. They devour anything they can together, maybe even a stray Zubat that wasn't fast enough to drink their blood. This in turn is problematic, creating a pressure itself and causing Zubat to evolve into Golbat, who is able to defend itself better and take better gorges of Rattata and Raticate. Though they sometimes drink too much as they are gluttons and the rats get their meal. At night, the Zubat population does drop as they leave the cave for better meal opportunities, and with the even cooler air, Quagsire leaves the water and searches for some easy meals of its own. Lastly, the moon pushes our tides and brings in small numbers of Staryu that would have been outside, shining towards the stars they once found company in.
Ruins of Alph, a place where you can find a former adventure. Within these ruins, we find relics of the old world. You can smash rocks to find helix and dome fossils and even old amber. But if you want to hear about our ancient Pokemon, I highly recommend you check out my ancient history video. I do geek out a lot and talk about their real-life inspirations and time periods in which they lived. So, that was a really fun video and I enjoyed it a lot. You get an idea as to how those Pokemon existed in the past. But, back to the present. Inside the ruins, we find Unknown, which don't fit within the ecosystem at all. In fact, they have their own realm. There's argument on whether they communicate with radio waves or telepathy. In the Japanese version of Pokemon Crystal, a researcher even implies that the Unknown began appearing at the ruins of Alph after the Pokemon Communication Center was built in Goldenrod City, implying the Unknown have some connection to radio waves or telecommunications. This text was translated and left unused in the English release. They are connected to Arceus in some capacity. It is unknown if they predate writing or are inspired by it. They can read thoughts, and in large numbers they can distort reality to fit the wishes of others. And they have a cooperative bond with Suicune for some reason. So, they just get to exist outside the ecosystem that does not hunt anything and is not hunted by anything, and where it derives its power from is hidden. Wink. Outside of the cave, though, we have a different story. At night, we get Wooper and Quagsire, and during the day, we get some new Pokemon, one being in very small, or rather smaller, numbers. Smeargle. The color of the paint, which is actually a mysterious fluid on its tail, oozes from the tail and varies from Smeargle to Smeargle, and the hue corresponds with its emotions. The mark on its back can vary in color and is placed upon it at adulthood. It uses paints to mark its territory with over 5,000 known variations. Smeargle is often found in urban areas filled with graffiti, so at this point, with all that information, we're kind of at an impasse. There is no diet data whatsoever in any form of medium for this Pokemon. There are animals that mark territory by urinating or clawing or scratching, but none that I can find that mark with paint-like substances. Though many creatures, like pufferfish and poison dart frogs, create their toxins through what they eat. This fluid has to come from somewhere, so where is it coming from? So, I mean, okay, fine. I mean, either we assume it's urinating through its tail, or it is able to process what it eats and turn it into the mysterious fluid. The problem with this is that Smeargle are naturally found only at these ruins, and with any other game that they are found, they're found alone, which, you know, or with only each other in the cave. You know, and we look at Rescue Mystery Dungeon, on one floor, there's a Blossom. Ultimately, there's just no consistency with this Pokemon whatsoever, and if we assume it eats Blossom, we have to assume that while yes, dogs are omnivores, Smeargle doesn't seem to be around others that it could eat, you know, other than each other, and or plant Pokemon, or in places where there are an exuberant number of berries available. So, I'm gonna make a hard call here, alright? Make a hard call. We're gonna go against real-world logic on this one and say Smeargle is not omnivorous, and instead, it's just simply eating berries. The only reason that they're probably at the ruins is simply because they are probably just partner Pokemon, potentially to any archaeologist, or attracted to the potential of a blank canvas. So, Smeargle, just like Drowsy, just like Ditto, are going on my list of I don't like you a little bit. At least I don't like you when I'm talking about the ecosystem, because you don't really seem to fit in or make sense. So I can't make sense of you, and it drives me up the wall. So how about we move on to a Pokemon we can make a lot of sense of, which is primarily here day and night, like in the largest numbers, not to. It can be found near ruins and in temperate and tropical forests. It usually forages for food on the ground, but will occasionally hop onto branches and peck at the tree's new shoots. It also picks food from cactus plants, easily avoiding the buds and spines, which
There is a real life bird that does this called cactus wren, amongst a couple of others, of course. It also has a card that was brought to my attention by my chat, where it was saved by buffalants from the snow, which may be an oxpecker reference, especially as they have similar coloration. But as we look back at Natu itself, due to prophetic abilities, it is very cautious and easily spooked. It has the quirky behavior of staring at something until the thing moves. Just front-facing Natu, staring at you until you move. It's like a baby just deadpan staring at you, just doing the dead stare as it just no thoughts, no emotion. It's not even staring at you, it's staring past you. So, with their blunt beak, though, added to all this information, it makes sense that this Pokemon would stick to fruits, shoots, and seeds. The only other Pokemon that we do see in this area as we move forward are found in the water. This includes, at all times, Quagsire, Poliwag, and Magikarp. So ultimately, the ecosystem isn't much to paint here, as many of these Pokemon don't really interact with each other. Some of them run off, some of them just, stay away from each other in general, and sometimes they just, see each other in passing and just wave like a neighbor. I don't know. I mean, Natu and Smeargle are conflict avoidance, and they eat flora. Wooper and Quagsire are just sticking to the water until they want to roam around, meaning they're just eating Poliwag and Magikarp, especially as they're not fast enough to catch a Natu or Smeargle. And Magikarp is bottom feeding, and Poliwag eats the usual seaweed, pond scum, and moss.
Route 33, a difficult and always rainy path that comes out in a cave. Nothing new here as we see Rattata, Spearow, Icon, Zubat, Geodude, and Hoppip, so ultimately we could just skip this route and head right into Ilex Forest, a large forest full of trees that are used to make charcoal. During the day, we see Caterpie, Metapod, Weedle, Kakuna, Pidgey, and Paris in the morning. At night, we get Zubat plenty of Oddish, Paris, Venonat, Psyduck, and Hoothoot. And I will include the trees if they are Headbutt, because we do get a slew of new Pokemon that, while I said I would ignore the headbutting of trees as it would get repetitive and be inconsequential, I feel like these should be included this time. It is the forest after all. We get Execute, Pineco, and 3 new Pokemon, 2 of which I didn't really actually get to cover in Kanto, starting with Butterfree. Its wings are coated with poisonous scales that easily fall off continuously as it flies. If inhaled, it results in several status conditions. Using this powder, it will defend Caterpie from bird Pokemon. The powder also repels water, enabling it to fly and gather honey even in the rain. It can use its sensitive antenna to detect the odors of blooming flowers 6 miles, 10 kilometers away from its nest in search of nectar, which it carries with the hairs on its legs. It also consumes sap from trees pierced by Heracross. It is found in temperate forests and jungles, but also flies near the ocean as part of its migratory breeding pattern. So let's take a quick tangent, because you probably already know the story about butterflies. When they migrate, they're moving, they're going across the ocean, the sea, whatever you want to say, right? And for some reason, they were observed to be going straight and then go around. Like they would just suddenly start to turn. And this was a consistent thing, and it would be a large arc, and they started to realize just how large of an arc it was. As they started to find out, this was actually where like this ancient mountain used to exist. So that's a pretty cool little bit of information, and I wonder if we'd see something similar with Butterfree and maybe the mountains of Hisui, even though, actually no, Hisui was in the Edo period, so that wouldn't make sense. Nevertheless, how about we move forward? Butterfree is known to sleep while flapping its wings. It tends to accidentally scatter highly toxic dust even while sleeping. And here you are thinking other Pokemon are way more dangerous. Meanwhile, we have Butterfree, who is constantly a danger by accidents. So how about we talk about a Pokemon that is constantly a danger on purpose with Beedrill, which isn't even a real bee or even a real wasp. It lacks the right number of legs and pigment pits, which is basically a simple eye instead of a compound eye. Highly territorial and not confirmed to actually ever live in true hives. I mean, we've seen them like on the trees and everything, but we've never seen an actual Beedrill hive, which I don't know if I ever want to see that. That sounds terrifying. They work together to solve basic problems regarding food, territory, and reproduction without any confirmation if there is a single breeding pair or a queen. It is especially concerned with the welfare of Weedle and Kakuna, responding aggressively to those that disturb them, so at least they're protective parents. Disturbing one will cause the whole group to attack. It flies at high speeds and attacks using the large venomous stingers on its forelegs and abdomen. It will then take the victims of its attacks back to its nest for food. So, if it doesn't kill you and accidentally leaves you alive, imagine how terrifying it would be. I mean, actually, now I think about it, that happened to Jesse, James, and Meowth. They were alive and they were brought back to the nest alive. That's scary. Or they were at least disguising themselves. I don't know, but it was bad. It actually is confirmed itself, though, to actually produce honey. And if we look at real bees or wasps, we get a slew of real-life info that does support Bijou being an opportunistic omnivore. It clearly eats, or at least it clearly creates, honey using nectar. And there are bees that will derive their honey from the sugars of overripe fruit. And there are vulture bees which make honey from meat, and apparently it tastes terrible. Not that I've tried it again, but I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't at least mind knowing just how terrible meat honey would be. Overall, though, bees can be across the board in terms of their diet, and as such, Beedrill represents the swath of them. The last new Pokemon that we have in this area would actually be Noctowl, which we've technically covered a little, but let's again talk about its appearance and what it does. The horns are apparently feathers. Elderly ones will grow a full beard, and of course it is nocturnal, known as the Emperor of Dark Nights by some. It can concentrate the faintest light and give itself night vision, or at least that gives it night vision. It is capable of silent flight, and it can twist its head at 180 degrees in order to increase its intellect. I love the idea that if I'm just this country bumpkin that's sitting like this, all I have to do is turn myself like this, and I've completely changed my intellect. And if I turn back, I'm just this old country bumpkin all over again. I want a talking Noctowl today that does exactly that. I want it to have basically two personalities in one body. One of them is just this southern, I don't care what you say, I want my sweet tea. Well, if it ain't got 17 gallons of sugar for every 1 gallon of tea, it ain't the right sweet tea, my boy. And then on the other hand, it's the, oh, how dare you put such a filthy sugar so much, how could you, in this tea? My Earl Grey is ruined. Like, that's what I want. I want a weird, posh, but southern Noctowl, depending on how its head is facing. Now, of course, I tried to do some actual research on this to try and find something that's relatively conclusive, but I couldn't find anything whatsoever on it. So the only real conclusion I could really come to, other than it just being a fun little silly, thing, because owls turn their head the way that they do, and they're known to be wise and intelligent, and so on and so forth, is that it just cuts off circulation to parts of its head and redirects it to other parts of its brain, and just basically gives itself brain damage in order to become smarter, which is really funny, but that's not what it does. So we're not going to consider that an actual thing, but that is a really funny thing to consider. So let's move forward. Its superior senses and intellect allow it to catch prey without fail in the darkness. It can also turn its head upside down, which signals that there is trouble and it's nearby something that would be trouble. If disturbed in this state, it will peck at the attacker or the offender. It is commonly found nesting in trees in temperate and boreal forests. And ultimately, we already decided that this bad boy is carnivorous. So now, how about we paint our picture of Ilex Forest? During the day, the sunlight beams between the leaves of the dense forest canopy. The ones that rise with the sun are Paris, Metapod, Caterpie, Weedle, Kakuna, and very small numbers of Pidgey and Zubat. It's clear what Caterpie and Weedle do, eating their fill in leaves as they try to avoid their predators. Pidgey swoops in, as would be expected, striking at each of our bug Pokemon, while Zubat, on the other hand, may be actually returning to their homes, and are simply a rare wandering Pokemon. Though this does not stop them from taking a quick bite along the way for some blood. Paris does as the Tochukaso mushrooms command, seeking tree roots and sapping the nutrients from them, though this leaves them open to attacks by Pidgey. And of course, both Metapod and Kakuna are left completely open to attack, even if Kakuna can use its poisonous stinger from its chest. The saving grace for these two lines of bug Pokemon is that Butterfree and Beedrill will swoop in to counter the birds of prey and send them flying away with powder or drill, especially if they dare intrude on Beedrill's territory. As the day progresses and night falls, many of our Pokemon are set to rest. Those that now rise, specifically from the ground and are in many numbers, the Oddish. They wander about at night, knowing that this is when they are safest, not only from predators, but also from the harsh sunlight as they grow in the moonlight. As they wander towards their next nutrient-rich destination, they may be struck down by Paris, looking for easy nutrients since Oddish absorbs so many. Alternatively, the second most common here is Venonat, who also stalks through the night, searching for any other bug Pokemon that it can eat, meaning that Paris is not truly free to roam through the night. Psyduck lose their way wandering into the forest, clutching their heads with eyes closed until they realize where they are. Being ducks, they're taking their pick of Oddish, Paris, Venonat, or make their way back to the water to ease their headache and simultaneously hunt down some Poliwag and Magikarp. Then, hidden within the trees, we have many Pokemon that are hidden away, likely undisturbed. The Execute able to deter most that would dare approach them besides the Butterfree and Beedrill. Hoot having to dare and strike at any of these insects receives an incredible amount of pressure back at them, and knowing it can't rely on a diet of Pineco, it is pressured, and some evolve into Noctowl. With their added abilities, some of which being Psychic Power, there aren't any other Pokemon here that could truly compete with it, unless of course it makes a swarm of Beedrill angry and is in turn turned into their next meal. Otherwise, it itself may feed upon more than just all of our insects, but also Psyduck, Execute, Zubat, Poliwag, and Magikarp given the opportunity, especially as it has superior night vision. Which, I have to admit, it was a little shocking to see just how many creatures horned owls eat. Thank you, Audubon Field Guide. I would have also included Celebi in all of this, but it just simply eats berries, and it isn't really part of the ecosystem here. In reality, it just keeps things in check, makes sure things are healthy, and deserves more love through a video of its own, not through just a brief mention of this, so one day I'll cover that. Route 34, a lush green path even though it's right next to a city. Here, during the day, we find Pidgey and Snubbull. Snubbull, it has loose skin that drapes to cover the lower parts of its body, giving it the appearance of a dress. It has powerful jaws with a large underbite. It possesses the ability to use their keen sense of smell to track things down. It tends to sleep half of the day and has a cowardly and timid nature despite its appearance. In addition, it is very playful and affectionate, making it a popular companion among women. It is very devoted and loyal, not aggressive, and would prefer to scare its opponents away rather than fight. It is capable of bonding easily and are often very spoiled. However, it is said to be Saturn that others run from it from its frightening appearance. So when it doesn't want to scare people away, it gets very sad. The growls themselves that it makes its foes uneasy, and it gets bullied by other puppy Pokemon and wanders around urban areas. Makes sense why we see it here, because there's also the daycare on this route. With a Pokemon that has such large teeth, especially with its evolution, and with such just a strong, well-developed jaw, we have to consider that this Pokemon line is definitely omnivorous. And it is a dog. I mean, so what else would you expect? I get it. We had our wonderful little Beagle Pokemon earlier, who we considered just to be an herbivore, but that was a very special case. So let's let the sun set as we get Hoot as per usual, and the outlier of Ecology, Drowsy. Yay! And then, of course, at all times of day, we have Rattata, Jigglypuff, Abra, and the other anomaly that goes against all ecological logic, Ditto. So I have both of my headaches on one route. It can't get much worse than this, I hope. In the water, though, we do see Krabby and Magikarp. And so we have like just a little mini portrait to kind of paint here. Even then, it's not that much of a portrait, as I believe since Jigglypuff is mostly air, it won't be attacked unless it enters someone's territory. Ditto is basically an anomaly, an invasive species that will never be eaten or have any reason to eat anything. Abra will teleport away from danger easily and eat its berries. Pidgey and Rattata work as per usual, including Hoot. Drowsy nose picks some dreams, and Snubbull likely goes after Rattata as a meal, assuming that it's not just in the area because of the daycare and as protection against Pokemon that would try to eat the daycare eggs. Unfortunately, there is also the chance that Krabby does get eaten by the Wandering Snubbull alongside the usual suspects, same as for Magikarp. So, that's fairly easy. And let's touch on Route 35, a bright path with a lake that's easy on the eyes and easy to traverse. During the day, we have Pidgey, Growlithe, and Snubbull. At night, we have Psyduck, Drowsy, and Hoot, and at all times, we get Nidoran male and female, Jigglypuff, Abra, Ditto, and in the smallest population, we have a 1% chance of Yanma, able to see in every direction around it while being a skillful flyer. It can make sudden stops, turn in mid-air, and hover in place by flapping its wings at a high speed. It can also generate shockwaves capable of breaking glass or even launching a house skyward by flapping its wings very fast. Yanma is often found in wooded and swampy areas and hunts insects for food and is territorial. So, cut and dry, it eats bugs. It's likely here as it is just passing through. What's interesting though is I will at least note that dragonfly nymphs will eat small minnows, but a nymph Yanma is not. Also, the idea that it could just flap its wings hard enough and send a house flying. Screw your foundation, screw anything else that you do to make sure your house doesn't get blown away normally. This dude has what, EF3 level of wind power? I don't know. I recently watched the new Twister movie because I had seen some recommendation that it did a phenomenal job in terms of the science behind it, or at least storm chasing or whatever, and I watched it, and now my brain is constantly thinking about weather, and now I want to do weather Pokemon, weather trio, blah, 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 blah. This is what happens. This is how I get obsessed and how I want to learn about stuff. I'm ready. Like, you know what? Whatever. Like, let's just say that, honestly, outside of the occasional battle of Yanma and our birds, or even Growlithe hunting down the Nidos and the birds, we don't really have anything here to paint a picture of. Route 36, a green and densely overgrown path that forks in two directions. During the day, we have Pidgey, Growlithe, and Ladybug. At night, we have Ghastly, Hoot, and Spinarak. And during the morning and night, specifically, not during the midday, we get Vulpix. And at all times, we get the Nidorans, Bellsprout, and a new one, Stantler. They live in herds in temperate mountainous forests. If ever separated from the herd, even a child is able to produce the illusion of a stampeding herd to scare away perceived threats. This is through their overall ability to distort reality and create illusions with those antlers. And if you stare at them for too long, you may feel as if you're being sucked in, as you start to become so dizzy that it is impossible to stand. They used to live in much tougher environments with more enemies in a time when their psychic powers were stronger. So basically they needed to have stronger powers in order to defend themselves. And since they are deer by all means, they also have the tendency to be a bit more skittish, running away as shown in Pokemon Legends Arceus. So a brief picture goes as follows. Considering, it's gonna eat grass, berries, so on and so forth, we can paint our little bit of a picture now. In the brush, our bunny-like Nidoran male and female hop about, searching for their next meal of berries together. The Ladybug soak up the sun, moving in groups, and the Stantler keeping together in the herd, all as predators lurk around each corner. Pidgey swoop and try to strike down Nidoran, but the male puts up a fight to keep the females safe, as is their nature. This is not always successful. These same Pidgey will of course go after Ladybug and even the Bellsprout swaying in the area, as even they are actively going after Ladybug, if not the Nidorans given the opportunity. Though I doubt it succeeds against those Nidoran. With all the commotion, Stantler tries to escape before it is noticed. It isn't a target for any of these Pokemon as it can defend itself well, but as one gets separated in the commotion, it is encountered by a Vulpix that takes its shot. The Stantler does what it can to defend itself, but Vulpix movement skulks, and it can't get away. The Skulk, in turn, tries to enjoy its fresh meal, but a Growlithe pounces when they least expect it, taking one of them as its own. They try to feign injury, then Growlithe goes after a second, and after letting its guard down, the first one escapes. Nevertheless, Growlithe has its meal. The sun sets, the Nidoran continue to move, knowing that they have better chances at night, and they have a strange attraction to the moon itself that they can't quite explain, but we can, as it will soon evolve and start to constantly seek out a moonstone. But that will not happen tonight. No, instead it must survive attacks from Hoot Hoot. The only thing giving the bird away is the ticking sound they make. In addition, the Bellsprouts still run around, but they lack good night vision and run directly into a Spinarak's web, becoming their next meal as long as Spinarak can defeat it without weakening it with poison. Stantlers sleep within the tall grass itself, making temporary nests as a deer would. And of course, once again, a stray Ghastly might come through and make a meal of anyone. National Park. A spacious and beautiful park. It's connected to the Pokeathlon Dome. Now, I said I would not be including man-made spaces, but I assume this is at least a preserve at the very least. Meaning Pokemon would naturally occur here anyway, even with some human influence. Plus, this is the only area where we find a Pokemon in Johto, so I wanted to bend the rules just a little bit, just so that way we could cover them. During the day, we do see Caterpie, Weedle, Metapod, Kakuna, Pidgey, Nidoran, and Ladybug, all of which we have already seen before, but now we add in Sunkern. Also, I have to throw out right now, let's take a small tangent. Sunkern was the first Pokemon that I really looked at, like, the Pokemon database for, or whatever, years and years ago. Like, I mean, probably about 7 years ago, maybe 8. I'm 25. And, longer than that then. I was 13, probably 14. Either way, the idea here was that I found out Sunkern could learn Solar Beam sooner than Sunflora. So I thought, don't evolve Sunkern, so that way I could get Solar Beam sooner, because I kind of like Sunkern. I thought it was cute. Sunflora is fun. Why not? So it was like the first Pokemon that made me start looking up Pokemon data, because I don't remember doing that for any other Pokemon prior to Sunkern. So it holds just a little bit of a special place in my heart. Back to actual Sunkern info though, it is known to be very weak, and it actually is aware of this. It only feeds until it evolves, but only feeds on dew from under the leaves of plants. So it's likely just getting whatever nutrients are leached from the water or leached by the water from the leaves themselves. It tries to move as little as possible since it tries to conserve all the nutrients it has stored for evolution. If attacked by predators such as Spearow, it shakes its leaves at the attacker. I don't know how effective that really is, but maybe it scares them away. It occasionally falls from the sky on early mornings for unknown reasons. I mean, it does kind of have like the little propeller hat kind of thing going on anyway. A year after a cold summer, the population of them explodes, and they can be found in temperate grassy meadows. It's a seed, so we could just assume any birds that eat seeds would also eat it alongside many of our bug Pokemon. Since it is not necessarily said to have a hard shell, we can assume it, but even if it does have a hard shell, it's not hard for these Pokemon to crack through. It's a weak Pokemon. It knows it. You know it. I know he, she, we, Wumbo. I'd dare to say that Nidoran probably consistently go after them even. They are like rabbits, basically. Poor Sunkern. Basically getting the Hoppip treatment and being eaten by everybody. At night, we do get Venonat, Psyduck, Hoot Hoot, and Spinarak. Now, I couldn't just ignore the bug catching contest completely. The problem here, though, is that it occurs on specific days, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and includes many Pokemon that are not found outside of these contest hours. So, unfortunately, we have to assume they are not completely naturally occurring, and even if they are removed from the ecosystem for the safety of the public and other creatures in the area. So, no picture painting here, as I'd just be repeating myself, and sorry, Scyther and Pinsir, you'll just have to wait until, the soonest they naturally occur on a route is Generation 4, poor things. See you after the Hoenn ecosystem! Route 37, a popular route for trainers, marked by 3 apricorn trees. Once again, we get a lot of the same cast as previous routes, but due to external pressure, we get the evolution of 3 Pokemon, meaning we're gonna get a nice little picture here. Our list includes during the day, Pidgey, Vulpix, Growlithe, and Ladybug, but with all the competition and threats, we now have Pidgeotto, which I have covered in the Kanto edition, and since that is a new major threat, even to groups of Vulpix and Ladybug, we get the evolution of the more hunted after Ladybug, Ledyen. It has a very small population here, but it sleeps wrapped in leaves or grass in temperate and tropical forests during the day. At night, it flutters around, scattering a glowing powder that is thought to bring good luck. It is believed to also use starlight as energy, and the patterns on its back grow larger or smaller depending on the number of stars in the sky. In addition to starlight, it loves to eat berries, and while it is a weak fighter, it tries for quantity over quality by throwing a barrage of punches with all 4 of its arms. This Pokemon is just a Joestar in the making. It is a little odd that we only find them during the day here, probably just when it's sleeping, so I mean, we're probably just stumbling upon their nest or their little, like, sleeping spot during the day, and then at night they just flutter off and go so far away that there's no encounter rate for them. Speaking of the night, though, we do have Vulpix again, Hoothoot in large numbers, Noctowl, Spinarak, Stantler, and with a small population alongside Noctowl, we finally see Ariados. Still not a spider, but it makes its nest in the depths of temperate and tropical forests and leaves after dark to hunt prey. It never rests in a specific place while hunting. So let's say it's hunting and it's waiting for its prey, it's going to keep circling around, which is actually kind of sick. While it wanders in search of prey, it spins a single thread from its rear that leads back to its nest, and when the prey is captured, it is wrapped in thread and then attacked by fangs. It drinks the victim's bodily fluids at its leisure, just like a fine little wine, just type O, beautiful. Sometimes it will instead release that prey with only a single thread attached. The thread is then followed to both the caught prey and that prey's friends. And then this Ariados has a buffet. While this is incredibly intelligent, I consider this to just be a little bit evil, even if it isn't really evil, as part of my most evil Pokemon video. So go watch that as well. It's a fun video. It was a great, nice little shorter video as part of like little Spooktober, October fun. And, you know, this is just a method of hunting more than it is actually evil. And I am absolutely considering that Ariados would be an opportunistic carnivore. Whatever it catches, it's eating. Though it would prefer meteor Pokemon and not the grassy ones. So let's paint a picture. Ladybug, being in high numbers, stick to groups. And while this helps the overall population survive, there's a problem. The Pidgey are in roughly the same number population-wise and still pick off many of them. The only saving grace these ladybugs have is that Vulpix and Growlithe skulk throughout the grass, picking off a few of these birds or scaring them away. Nevertheless, this isn't enough to keep the ladybug safe, and through enough external pressure, the veteran ones evolve into Lediyin, now able to fight back and protect their kin from Pidgey. This allows them to live happily and freely sometimes. This happens for a while until, unfortunately, Pidgey is cornered by its predators, their numbers decreasing as even their prey are able to fight back with a flurry of blows. This causes Pidgey to evolve into Pidgeotto, which, while they are small in number, these Pidgeotto can easily fight back with gale force winds against any creatures of the day. Then, as we switch to nighttime, all of these creatures rest with exception to Vulpix. And since we know foxes eat bugs thanks to Birmingham and Black County Wildlife Trust, we can safely assume that it will still be trying to hunt after anything it could burn with its bright flame. This includes Hoothoot and Spinarak, maybe even the occasional Stantler if they are moving in skulks. The problem they seem to have here, though, is that Spinarak is truly at the bottom, with a weaker disposition, and with predators on all sides, it grows in size to counteract Vulpix and others as it becomes Ariados. Now it can find the skulks of Vulpix and strike before they are ready. Now it can catch Hoothoot unawares. Now it has the strength to find reliable meals despite the type disadvantage it has. Now would be a great time if I was sponsored by some sort of meal company. Either way, if it really wishes, it may get lucky at times and get a Stantler, assuming its psychic power doesn't put down this false spider. With the hunter becoming the hunted and not having many prey, Hoothoot has no choice but to expand its wings and become Noctowl. With superior night vision and silent wings, it can easily evade webs and hunt down Vulpix and Ariados alike, finding them to be easier prey than going after Stantler, allowing Noctowl to conserve energy for the next hunt. Route 38. A path that weaves through trees and comes out at a farm. This area does get a little weird since we do have a farm nearby here, and that influences the area because of human settlements as well, even further down the line. So we're gonna just kind of we can't even really pretend that the encounters here are entirely natural. I mean, there is a farm here. So with the idea of the farm, you don't have to. You could, you're going to put it at the most ideal location. Those ideal locations might already have good land that you would already expect these animals to live on, and makes it easier to sustain them, even though you can develop the land yourself. So let's assume, in this scenario, that these Pokemon do live naturally in this area a little bit. And I say a little bit for a reason, because otherwise they could just be escaping the enclosure, depending on which ones we talk about. During the day, we have Pidgeotto, Rattata, and Farfetch'd, in addition to 2 others in very small number that, as I stated, are likely just escaping their enclosures, Tauros and Miltank. Starting with Tauros, they are a violent and rowdy Pokemon, whipping itself into a frenzy using its 3 tails. Though it is calmer in places like Alola, the whipping serves as a warning to others before it charges with astonishing speed. Once it starts charging, it will not stop until it crashes into something. It will not even change its course until that point. It is capable of even smashing through large boulders and lives in herds on plains and grasslands. And it will lock horns with others of its kind. The herd's protector takes pride in battle-scarred horns, which, honestly, that sounds really cool. I want a big, tough, just Tauros that just has scars all over it. That'd be amazing. And since it is a bovine, we can apply this next part to Tauros and Miltank in terms of diet, as according to worldanimalprotection.us, cows' natural diet consists mainly of grasses, legumes, alfalfa, clover, and hay in the wild, fairly cut and dry. Next up, though, we do have Miltank with signature move Milk Drink. Ugh. It has milk that is sweet and very nutritious, even being able to heal Pokemon and ill or weary humans. Drinking a large amount of it will cause weight gain and stomach pains, and to my fellow lactose intolerant people, we are too stubborn to stop, though that is until you start getting older like I have, and drinking straight milk is actually causing problems to your stomach. So now I still eat blocks of cheese. It's fine. That doesn't bother my stomach as much. I don't think I could eat yogurt though either. Gotta get my probiotics somewhere. Nevertheless, the taste and nutrition of the milk improves with the quality of the pastures it lives on, and the taste itself changes with the season. Never have mint milk. I tried. I didn't like it. The orange creamsicle is pretty good. Now that I talk about it, I wonder if I could go get some today. I might do that as a reward. It can produce over 5 gallons of milk per day, which can also be turned into yogurt or enjoyed unchanged by children and adults alike. Miltank can become ill if it is not milked every day. It lives in grasslands, and it is also raised on farms. It has been supporting the lives of people and other Pokemon since ancient times with its ability to produce milk. Thank you, Pokemon, for basically giving your lesson on real cows, because that's literally what Miltank is. Miltank is literally just a real cow. And because I was curious on just how accurate this could be to real cows, I found out.
Considerable experimental evidence has shown that during the winter months, the development of oxidized flavors greatly increases in milk, and after the cows are on a pasture or are fed green feed, this flavor practically disappears.
Thank you, Science Direct. So basically, yes, in addition to that, the flavor of milk does change with the seasons because of the dietary changes that happen in real cows as well. By the way, all Tauros are male and all Miltank are female. Bulls, cows. Yeah. At night we do get Meowth and Noctowl, and during all times we get Raticate, Magnemite, and a 1% chance of Snubbull, which I guarantee is just a guard dog that got out of the fence from the farm, as it would be phenomenal at barking very, very loud and scaring cattle back to the pen. So I'm kind of just going to omit it from this inclusion here for the most part. Again, it's just very influenced heavily by humans, which makes sense for Johto. Honestly, none of these Pokemon are hunting Tauros or Miltank, as those two will absolutely squash whatever comes their way. Must I remind you of Whitney for Miltank at the very least? Then, as for Meowth, sure, it'll go after Rattata and Farfetch'd, but it in turn will get attacked by Raticate, Pidgeotto, or Noctowl depending on the time of day, and Magnemite, I'm just going to say, wanders in from Olivine. And I can support this as we look at the next route. Route 39, a downhill path that passes through a grassy and breezy plain. This is where the farm can be found, and it has roughly the same exact encounter rates with the same Pokemon. So, very one-to-one. Let's move on. Route 40. You can hear the waves on this path from West Olivine City to the sea. Funnily enough, we have nothing new to talk about here, except if we smash some rocks, there is a 10% chance we encounter a Shuckle, the mold Pokemon. Rather than actively hunting and foraging for food like most other Pokemon, it collects berries and stores them within its shell. The berries inside are liquefied and fermented while they decompose by Shuckle's digestive juices, which it then consumes. Its digestive juices are also used to dissolve rocks so Shuckle can hide under them. These Pokemon are found often in the mountains. The Pokemon Company may not be able to admit it themselves because they are targeted towards children, but fermenting juice? Yeah, that's just wine. But that might not actually be correct. I tried to find ways to remove the alcohol from wine, but the only ways to reduce or remove it would be boiling, picking less ripe grapes, spinning cones, and reverse osmosis, or distillation, which I don't see a glass's word Shuckle anywhere around here, unless you do. Though I do suppose if the berries are very old, becoming moldy, the mold Pokemon, and then they are fermented, technically they would have no alcohol content in them, as the sugars have all already broken down. And yes, according to the Australian Government Department of Health and Aged Care, the alcohol in drinks is called ethanol, ethyl alcohol. It is made when yeast ferments the sugars in grains, fruits, and vegetables. For example, wine is made from the sugar in grapes, and vodka is made from the sugar in potatoes, meaning there is the chance that since yeast is not involved and the berries are somehow fermenting, it is not alcoholic. Which, let's take this a step further as we consider things like sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, kefir, whatever. I don't know what that fermented milk yogurt drink thing. I've had it. It's like spicy milk. It feels like it's carbonated milk. I don't know how I feel about it. But anyway, and of course yogurt, amongst many other things that I did not mention that are fermented in a number of different ways, some involving yeast, others not, and are not alcoholic. So yes, I understand there are additional or they are different foodstuffs, but I would still argue that this applies to Shuckle and its berries. The only other Pokemon that may be going after it would be Krabby, because Krabby will move up rocks, it might break rocks. I mean, it does have a strong pincer as it evolves into Kingler in the future, but not here. And it is going to just go after whatever it can eat as an opportunistic omnivore. Otherwise, we do have in the water Tentacruel, more Krabby, Magikarp, Corsola, and Staryu, all of which we have talked about before and their relations to each other. Route 41. A rough spot in the sea where whirlpools block your path. We get the water shaken up a bit with some new waves from some new Pokemon. While we have Tentacool and Tentacruel in large numbers on the surface of the water, we also get a new friend gliding on the water and even in the air just a little bit, Mantine. It thrives in open seas where it swims freely, often in schools where they race one another. It can breach out of the water and fly 300 feet, 100 meters, into the air if it builds enough speed. In the past, it was often misidentified as a bird Pokemon by observers who saw this behavior. Mantine is sometimes seen with Remoraid attached to the underside of one of its fins, scavenging for leftovers and fighting together with it when attacked. It has a docile nature and does not mind the Remoraid clinging onto its fin. So let's look at its real life inspiration because we didn't get any real diet here. So the Manta Ray is going to be what it's based off of, and that's what we're going to look for its diet. According to NOAAfisheries.gov, manta rays primarily feed on planktonic organisms such as euphasids, copepods, mysids, decapod larvae, and shrimp. But some studies have noted the consumption of small and moderately sized fish as well. So that Remoraid is very lucky that it isn't the next meal and they have a symbiotic relationship. After all, I'm positive that Remoraid is basically eating the food under it and pecking away at any parasites before they could truly infest Mantine. The weird thing, though, is that they aren't found by fishing, meaning they are staying on the surface of the water. And the only other Pokemon on the surface of the water is Tentacool. Are they eating Tentacool? Why don't we dig deeper and try to find that out with the more realistic evidence? According to SeaParadise.com, In addition to plankton, manta rays may also consume small fish and squid when they find them. Manta rays have adapted their feeding habits to suit their environment. They generally feed in shallow waters near coral reefs or sandbanks, where there is more food available than in deeper waters. They will swim with their mouths open and filter out whatever happens to be swimming by, which makes it easier for them to capture prey. Some even venture into deeper water at night if conditions are favorable for finding food. They also feed on various types of plankton such as krill, copepods, and jellyfish that can be found among the reefs. I then try to cross-reference this with the NOAA fisheries, specifically looking at the giant manta ray, but all I could get from there is... But some studies have noted their consumption of small and moderately sized fish as well. When feeding, mantas hold their cephalic fins in an O shape and open their mouths wide, creating a funnel that pushes water and prey through their mouth and over their gill plates. Manta rays use many different types of feeding strategies, such as barrel rolling, doing somersaults over and over again, and creating feeding chains with other mantas to maximize prey intake. So, it's possible that manta rays might eat jellyfish, but it's unlikely that they are actively hunting them at all. Despite this, mantine itself seems to be more of an opportunistic carnivore and filter feeder, eating whatever comes its way. This would also help us make sense as to why Tentacool's big brother Tentacruel is here, is because they were pressured to evolve due to the mantine population. Now, as we fall deeper into the water, we do get Tentacool, Magikarp, Shelder, and Chinchou. Inside its antennae are electricity-generating cells that create so much electrical power that they even make Chinchou tingle slightly. The orbs on its antennae can glow and light up from the electric current, which Chinchou uses to lure prey. It also flashes its light to communicate with others of its kind and claim territory. I just imagine it aggressively flashing people. By discharging both positive and negative electricity from its front antennae, it can both defend itself and stun its prey. They live on dark ocean floors, rarely coming up to the surface, though it has demonstrated the ability to walk on land, which I had never considered before, but it does have those cute little legs behind it. Basically, it is a much cuter, more zappy version of the football fish, which are going to eat whatever come near, whatever they can get within their mouths. So, sorry, Shelder, I thought you were going to be safe here, but not anymore.
Route 42, a small path opened at the base of challenging Mount Mortar with multiple entrances to it. Oddly enough, despite the great swath of Pokemon here, we don't have any big new encounters, so no big picture to paint here, but let's at least quickly run through what is here. During the day, we see Spearow, Fearow, Ekans, and Arbok, and at night, we see Zubat, Golbat, and Marill. So I lied to you, maybe there was a little bit of a new Pokemon, but nothing big, despite one weird thing going on with Marill. Because it's capable of swimming in water currents without being slowed down by those water currents by water resistance due to its water repellent fur. Now, even though I wrote that down, and I wrote it down in a different way, I had to retry and say that a couple different ways. So to try and explain a little better, I'm going to try to explain this a little bit better to you, right? So basically, its fur is water repellent, and with water currents pushing up against it, it somehow has no problem whatsoever, has no issue with water resisting its movement because of that fur. At that point, you might as well say that it's actually flying because it can resist any tide. Anywho, it feeds on aquatic plants in addition to fishing for food. When it dives, its tail can be seen bobbing on the water surface. It will anchor its tail around a tree when fishing at the edge of a fast-moving stream. Water never gets cold after swimming... Marill never gets cold after swimming in cold water due to its fur that dries up quickly the moment it leaves the water. So the fur is very confusing on whether it's water like completely repellent or partially repellent or what's going on there. Either way, it lives at the water's edge. It's basically just a water mouse. Who would have guessed? It is a mouse. And since it is a mouse Pokemon, it will get hunted by the Spearow line, the Ekans line, heck, even the Zubat line for some blood if they really wanted. Speaking of things being hunted here, during all times, we have Rattata,
Raticate, Mankey, Mareep, and Flaffy. Flaffy, storing too much electricity caused Flaffy to lose the wool over most of its body, but the bare, rubbery skin protects it from the electricity stored in its fleece. I hope it's like that soft rubber, not like the really like plasticky rubber at the very least. The quality of Flaffy's fleece can change to generate more electricity with less wool. The orb will light up when fully charged, and it can attack by firing electrified hairs at opponents. It typically inhabits grassy meadows and fields. Just imagine giant clumps of wool just being shot at you. It's kind of like that meatball guy in My Hero. Just a throwaway character, unfortunately. So yeah, let's just say the uptick in predators created a pressure, considering they could actually hunt Mareep, which in turn caused Mareep to evolve in order to survive. I mean, birds, rats, and bats are pretty scary when they're actually large enough to eat you. Thank you, Raticate. Now, you might be wondering, though, what's in the water near here? After all, Marill does have to eat. So, we have Goldeen, Magikarp, and finally, Seaking. It is a very powerful swimmer that is found in rivers and streams. It can swim not only against the river's current, but up waterfalls as well. In the autumn spawning season, it grows fatter and more vibrant. It travels upriver where male Seaking engage in elaborate dances to court females. The female would go for the Seaking with the most graceful dance. It uses its horn to bore holes in riverbed boulders in order to shelter its eggs from water currents. A mated pair takes turns patrolling around their new nest for roughly a month and defend it with their lives. We assumed Goldeen would pretty much attack and eat anything in their territory, so we shall actually assume the same thing for Seaking. Once again, there's nothing incredibly noteworthy here that wasn't said in the Kanto edition of the ecosystem. The big ones here being that Fearow definitely eats Zubat and Golbat. Golbat tries to take blood from everything but might get zapped by Flaffy. Marill is slowly prey that at least gets to eat Magikarp and Goldeen, but in turn gets speared through the chest like your favorite anime protagonist by Seaking. Moving on to Mount Mortar, a naturally large cavern that is incredibly spacious. And once again, I actually hate to admit it, but this cave is very, very, very reminiscent of other caves, except now we have Marill here. So floors may include Rattata, Raticate, Zubat, Golbat, Machop, Machoke, Geodude, Graveler, Marill, Goldeen, and Seaking. And considering Machop and Machoke only really care about Geodude and Graveler here, using them as, weightlifting tools, there are no real new interactions to actually consider here. I was really hoping for something exciting, but not really. And the more I try to sit here and think about it, I mean, Geodude and Graveler, they're making tunnels or eating rocks. The Zubat, Golbat line, they're getting their blood. Rattata and Raticate are using this as a little bit of a home, so you're going to get rat droppings everywhere, unfortunately. And Marill is not finding purchase with them as friends, I'll tell you that much. In fact, Marill's just kind of wandering in here from time to time, and maybe it has some level of, moisture, so that's why it likes it. But, I mean, otherwise there's the Goldeen and Seaking here as well. That kind of just come in. So, oh well, let's move on to Route 43, a woodland path that comes out at a lake. Beware the Greedy Gate. So, the Greedy Gate is just a reference to the fact that Team Rocket's going to try and take your money here during the short time period. So, it's about time we do get a little bit of extra variation. During the day, we get Pidgeotto, Farfetch'd, Sentret, and its evolution, Furret. Now, we already talked about Furret, stating that it would basically eat anything it gets its hands on, as it is carnivorous. But the remainder of the unmentioned info is as follows. It tends to burrow under the ground of meadows and other temperate grasslands. Its narrow burrows are well suited for its slim body and are very difficult for other Pokemon to enter. The burrows also become more maze-like the deeper inside you go, which means it's even harder to find its nest. In the Lentil region, Mightyena is actually a natural predator of Furret. I mean, that kind of makes sense, even though Mightyena is a hyena, and hyenas aren't canines. Whatever, they do their thing. Though that does make me want to ask you, would you like me to cover the other games, like the side games, like the Lentil region? I'd like the other, that's Pokemon Snap, but I'm trying to think of other regions, other side games, maybe even Mystery Dungeon if applicable, at least once. Is that something that you'd be interested in? And I might cover it at some point. Otherwise, I'm at least going to keep to the main games, including the Legends games, as we go along, until I decide to take a sidestep and cover those. So just let me know. For now, let's move on to the nighttime, where we get Venonat and Noctowl alongside a new contender, Venomoth. Its wings are covered in dust-like scales that vary in color depending on their toxic capability. Dark scales are poisonous, while lighter scales cause paralysis. These scales are released when Venomoth flutters its wings and leak a poison once they make contact with the skin. So, to reiterate that, scales are going to fly off. Depending on the color, they have different effects. And once they make contact with you, that poison seeps from the scales into you, like some weird, like, nasty patch. They live in dense, temperate forests with thick undergrowth and little light. As a nocturnal Pokemon, it only comes out at night to hunt for its favorite prey. It prefers to feed on insects that gather around light sources, and Venomoth is attracted to bright light itself. It is known to have a short lifespan. So, do we just want to make the assumption that Venomoth might also eat Venonat and each other? I mean, it isn't out of the ordinary as a concept, so we can. After all, we already said Krabby does that in times of desperation. So, sure. Venomoth not only eats each other, but they eat Venonats, and they eat pretty much any other insect that it can. Next at all times, we see Eradicate, Mareep, Flaffy, and Girafarig. Ooh! One of the best Pokemon out there, one of my personal favorites, because I love giraffes themselves. Favorite animal, hands down, they're great. But Girafarig itself lives in savannas and grasslands where it feeds on plant life. That was fairly easy to figure out what it eats and what's its diet. Though, its tail possesses a head of its own with yellow eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth and a small brain. However, this head is incapable of independent thinking and relies on outside stimuli, such as smell, to guide its actions. If the tail smells something alluring, it will bite. It often mimics the head during feeding and is able to warn the Pokemon of danger if it is sleeping. The tail head can also unleash psychic powers. I will at least say Beta Girafarig looked, because it's a palindrome, which is the word forward, same as it is backwards. The original design, the dark part of Girafarig was just going to be the front half of Girafarig, but darker, until they changed it to be like just that tail head that we have nowadays. Which, I can't wait till, 7 gens from now, and I get to talk about Astronaut Girafarig, otherwise known as Farigiraf. But, since the tail is part of Girafarig, we are going to rightfully assume that it will just take a bite of any berries or other flora it can smell. They do share a digestive system, so you can't be sitting there eating anything that is meat, otherwise the body will not process it. Those teeth have got to be real good, though, at keeping potential predators away as well, which this just adds to the list of Pokemon that do not follow the idea of carnivores have sharp teeth and front-facing eyes. Yes, I'm still very salty about the idea that Clefairy, or people saying Clefairy, eat Zubat. I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to sit and spin it. You know what? Let's take a tangent, because I'm that salty about it right now. So, Chinese water deer, alright? Semi-front-facing eyes and fangs down to their freaking chin, alright? But you know what they eat? Do you know what they eat? The diet of the Chinese water deer includes reeds, coarse grasses, vegetables, and beets. The Chinese water deer has a full-chambered stomach, but the rumen pillars are poorly developed. Because of this, the deer cannot digest the carbohydrates from plant material very efficiently. Thank you, animaldiversity.org. Feel free to look it up anywhere else at that point because they don't eat meat! You are using generalizations of predators to try and determine something in black and white ideals that are incorrect. So, as I have stated before, sit and spin. Clefairy, despite having front-facing eyes and sharp teeth, does not eat anything. And I know that Clefairy is we're not even talking about Clefairy in this region, but you know what? I brought it up because the generalizations kind of make me upset. There's a reason why you're supposed to do research on every single creature, every single thing, and consider where it's from, where it's going, and where it would naturally interact with other creatures. That is what the purpose of this for. You know what? I'll give credit to anybody else who decides to do actual constructive criticism. Continue to do so. Hold me accountable. Pop this ego of this balloon ego every once in a while. I deserve it. I'll be honest. So, let's just move on. As in the water, we once again have Poliwag and Magikarp. So, you know, basically, with Venonat being hunted so fervently by Sentret, Farfetch'd, Raticate, and Pidgeotto, it evolved in order to stand some sort of chance here. Unfortunately, it just kind of perpetuates the cycle as it has inadvertently added another predator to the list that will try to eat Venonat, as there are no other regularly occurring insects. The problem here is that every other predator that was already hunting it as Venonat is still going to hunt it as Venomoth, with exception to Sentret. I mean, it's just not strong enough, assumedly, to take it down. But it has nothing to really worry about, since its Glucose Guardian of a Furret can just do its way over and just it down for the family to eat. So have dinner, it's gonna be great. The other problem that the Sentret have here, and why we see more Furrets here than in other areas, is because of the Pidgeotto and Raticate, which are definitely trying to feast on a small Tanuki Meerkat. Even Mareep is having problems because Pidgeotto can take it down for a meal if it feels the need to, and this is happening so often that it is forced to evolve to survive. This would explain why we see triple the amount of Flaffy than Mareep in the area. I don't want to discount Farfetch'd, but like, it sticks to its leak, and maybe the Venonat, maybe the occasional Raticate if it's lucky. You know, it just kind of, you know, it gets what it can. It gets what it can. That leek is its primary food source after all. Then we have Noctowl instead of Pidgeotto, as they get the same pickings but at nighttime. Raticate, Venonat, maybe a Mareep if it feels like it. All the while, Girafarig probably only has to worry about Raticate, since it can be very, very aggressive and is an opportunistic omnivore. Now, I know that we have stated before, like, okay, owls aren't going to eat sheep, mice do not eat, like, sheep either, or neither of them eat giraffes, but these are special occasions in which we have much larger predators that are about the same size as these Pokemon. So, it only stands to be reasonable that they could hunt them down. And of course, when necessary, any of our meat-eating friends may take their hand at the Poliwag and Magikarp, which are sitting firmly at the bottom of rank. Lake of Rage, also known as Gyarados Lake, a huge lake full of clear blue water. There are literally only Magikarp and Gyarados here, but let's take a look at the lore because it gives us a nice idea of the ecosystem with just Magikarp and Gyarados. It is stated the Lake of Rage was created the last time many Gyarados got together and stirred up a storm. The crater that remained filled with rainwater and became the Lake of Rage. What's also really cool is apparently there is a normal and flooded version of the lake that occurs in Heart Soul Silver, which I had never actually noticed before. Now, it is unfortunate that there are no other Pokemon found in the water here, but it is a monoculture by all means then. And for good reason. After all, the Gyarados can be incredibly aggressive and destructive, and I called them Nature's Reset Button and Shaper of the Environment in the Kanto edition of Ecology for a reason, because that's exactly what they are. They're like a wildfire, and it's beautiful. Route 44, a wonderful path with a few pleasant springs and abundant greenery. During the day, we find the bug-eating Lickitung. Well, insects are at least its primary meal. Its tongue is twice the length of its body, at over 6 foot, 6 inches, or roughly 2 meters. Sticky, smelly saliva coats its tongue, which causes a tingling sensation when touched and can cause rashes if not cleaned off. You know that tingling sensation when you're eating a pineapple? Yeah, that's kind of what I imagine it feels like. Or if, like, you take pre-workout and you get, like, pins and needles all over your body, and maybe a mix of those two things. And, I mean, the rash is probably your body trying to defend itself. Kind of like how allergies work, but not quite. That tongue is also connected to its tail, as the tail moves when the tongue does, though I would also argue that this is not just a weird storage place for a super extended tongue, but also a way for Lickitung to maintain balance when the tongue is extended. It uses this tongue for capturing prey, mainly bug-type Pokemon, reaching for berries, exploring its environment, attacking, and cleaning. Although, the effectiveness of its cleaning is questioned, as it just kind of leaves this nasty smell behind because of the saliva. The saliva can also be used as a strong adhesive after cooking it, and it remembers things by their texture and taste, although apparently it dislikes sour things. So, let's take a tangent here. There are different ways that different creatures identify stuff. Humans have this tendency to identify by sight. If you know raccoons, I don't know why you wouldn't know raccoons, but they will take their food, they will dunk it in water, And that's not actually really to clean it. That's because they identify by touch. Their primary form of identification is by touch. So when they are holding something, the best way to make sure they can feel the full texture of it is actually by wetting it. So, I mean, yeah, they do get weirdly confused, of course, when things melt away, because it's like, how was I holding something and then now I'm not, and there's no texture? That doesn't make sense to my brain. Dogs are by smell. That's very clear, as my puppy sneezes next to me. Not my puppy. You're gonna go for it. Go for it. Go for it. Go sneeze. Sneeze. Do it. Do it. She's not gonna sneeze. Nevertheless, there are, like I said, multiple different ways that creatures identify through their senses. I imagine there are a couple that are purely by, or primarily by sound. I don't know any off the top of my head. Back to Lickitung, though. Its tongue is dexterous and powerful enough to lift people, and when it does capture prey, it prefers swallowing them whole after paralyzing them with its tongue. That's a horror sentence right there. It can be found in grassy plains and meadows, so this is a hard one, right? Because we could say it's an omnivore that prefers insects. It is clearly a salamander of sorts, so let's look up what Bulbapedia suggests. The lungless salamander, which these things do have a projectile tongue and hyoid apparatus, which they can fire almost a body length away from them at high speeds to capture prey. I couldn't find a singular source I was trusting enough to quote, but many of them do state that they eat insects, small crustaceans, some worms, and just general small animals. And as a quick check, they are still actually part of the salamander family. In fact, they are apparently the most rich family of salamanders, according to Science Direct. So let's assume that while it prefers bugs, if there are none for Lickitung to eat, it is going to just eat anything and everything it can wrap its tongue around, and that is a very big, at average, 12-foot tongue at length. Gross. Meanwhile, at night, we really only get Poliwag, but we do get its evolution Poliwhirl, and at all times of day, we get Bellsprout, Weepinbell, and Tangela. Looking at the water, we do also get Poliwag and Magikarp, but otherwise, there's nothing really new here. I will at least admit that Tangela is here for the first time with other Pokemon, and we do know that Tangela does hunt other Pokemon, but that prey can easily escape as the vines snap off super easily. Now, I have a feeling that while Poliwhirl is a frog, I would say since it isn't fully mature, it is just not an obligate carnivore just yet, as adult frogs are. In which case, there is the chance that it might try to eat Tangela, which is similar enough to the many things it would eat as Poliwag. And while it might be able to keep up with Bellsprout, it likely stands no real chance against the Weepinbell, which are in higher numbers. Or while Lickitung is just getting its fair share of every Pokemon in the area that it prefers to eat on any given day. Ice Path, a cave that connects Route 44 to Blackthorn City. We have a couple of floors to go through here, and while they hold the same Pokemon, we might find a little bit of a story here if we look at the encounter rates. On the first floor, we see Swinub only during the day, which is easily one of my favorite ice types of all time, the only other one being Snorunt, which we're not covering today because that's not part of this region. It uses its pig-like nose to dig through mud and snow, looking for anything edible. Occasionally, it will come across hot springs while scouring the ground. Its favorite food is a type of mushroom that grows beneath dead grass, though it also eats berries. When a Swinub finds an attractive smell, it will run desperately to find out the source of the aroma. It inhabits cold places such as icy caves, mountainous regions, and frozen tundra. Cut and dry, berries, and mushrooms. While yes, I understand a wild pig might be an opportunistic feeder, we have another rule breaker here, and not really if we look at it a little bit closer. Because as we dig deeper into Piloswine and Mamoswine, you know, a mammoth, they use their tusks, or at least Mamoswine and Piloswine, use their tusks for defense and to dig up food, not for hunting. After all, the ice is thick, but those tusks are gonna be a heck of a lot thicker. At night, we do see Delibird. Right off the bat, we see that it states Delibird is omnivorous. It carries food bundled up in its tail and normally gives stored food to its chicks, but has been known to share its food with humans stranded on icy mountains, not other Pokemon. In a flock, the Delibird with the largest tail is its leader. It tends to live in mountainous regions, making its nest over sharp cliffs, notably around Mount Everest. Yeah, it actually says that in Ruby Sapphire Pokédex. Also, every time I think of a bird on a cliff, I think of the one that jumped off a little too early, and to my knowledge, that bird did not survive. The Pokemon we see at all times include Zubat, Golbat, and Jynx in the smallest population. And here's a fun tidbit to start us off. Originally, its face was colored black. Pokemon Stadium's fainting animation had it disappear, leaving only its hair behind, implying what appears to be dark-colored skin is actually just darkness. And we may have recently learned it was geared up to have a Mega Evolution before it got scrapped. So yes, I do know about the Pokemon leaks. To address that now, I'm not doing a video on it. I will probably mention stuff here and there that may have been found from it because it's still information that, you know, I love as lore. But considering it was a leak that was so large, it even got information on people's past and future employees that were there, I'm good. I'm not a fan, so I will have to pass on that. Thank you very much. Then again, like I said, I'll probably look at... I've been reading the information from what's been released, but I just don't feel comfortable doing a video on it, considering that is a major leak, an illegal hack, and a massive issue. Back to Jynx, though, I wonder if that Mega would have been more like a Gyaru, more like a Viking, or an opera singer when it did get its Mega. Or maybe when it does get its Mega. Jynx has a language that sounds similar to human speech and includes several cry patterns, though it has yet to be deciphered. It prefers to communicate by using dance-like movements. These rhythmic movements often cause people to dance along with it, often uncontrollably. They are able to extend their lips to kiss its opponents and are often found in urban areas. Is it wrong that I just imagine, since it's in an urban area, it running over to a Rattata and just slurping it up like a noodle? So we got no real diet data, but why don't we actually look at a quote on Smoochum? Being very conscious of its appearance, it will check its reflection when given the chance to make sure it is not dirty. It will bathe the instant it finds any dirt on its face, however, it doesn't mind if its body gets dirty. This still doesn't quite give us an idea of its diet, unfortunately. Even when we look at other natural spawns, it seems like these Pokemon might actually just eat berries because they're not really around consistent other Pokemon that we could say are its natural prey. So it doesn't really seem like it's hunting anything, or else we would get an evolution of a Pokemon in that area due to the pressure of Jynx existing there. And the only one that evolves is Zubat, which, I mean, it's surrounded by ice types. It's at a disadvantage. So from here on forth, we will assume that Jynx and Smoochum are, oddly enough, primarily herbivores. As we go through each of the floors, we actually see less of our bats and actually more of a Pokemon that serves as a pack hunting predator of all it's ambitious enough to take down. Sneasel. Smart, sneaky, and notoriously vicious. It blends well into the night in order to ambush their prey. It feeds on eggs, such as those of Pidgey that it steals from unattended nests. It uses its claws to poke a hole in the egg before slurping the contents out. It has been known to form pairs to hunt. One Sneasel will lure the parents away from their nest while the other steals their eggs. Although the pair works together, they will also fight over their hunt among themselves. As a result of its egg-based diet, they are despised by breeders to the point where they try to drive away or eradicate the Sneasel. I will also say I know for a fact Weavile, which absolutely hunts in packs, will hunt down Mamoswine amongst many other Pokemon. And on top of all this, all Pokemon are born in egg-like eggs, or just flat-out actual eggs, meaning Sneasel is a threat to everyone. What is likely happening in this cave is we have Zubat and Golbat trying to get their normal meals. Meanwhile, there may be Jynx moving around through the area since they are in low numbers. Maybe they do pick up, like, after the Swinub, after they've dug around in the area for their food, for roots, for berries, for whatever it might be. And there is, of course, the chance that they actually end up helping each other. Although the unfortunate part is that Swinub are in very high numbers, which only matches one other Pokemon in the area in terms of population, Delibird. But Delibird is only appearing at night, meaning that it is feasting on Zubat which would also help explain the much higher Golbat population than what we would normally see, other than just putting the blanket statement down that there are a bunch of ice types threatening it, and this is the only cave that it can go into for safety, quote-unquote safety at this point. Finally, as everyone may think they are safe, it only turns out that behind their backs, a Sneasel is drinking away their offspring straight from the egg. Route 45, a winding road by a river, but called Mountain Road. This one gets exciting, as we get a number of new Pokemon to talk about, but I want to start with the water, because in the water, we see Magikarp and finally, Dratini. A reptilian Pokemon whose life energy is constantly building, so it is always growing. It can reach lengths of over 6 feet, 2 meters. As it grows, it sheds its skin regularly, hiding behind a rapid waterfall during the process to protect itself since the new skin is soft in texture. And a small colony has been found before, and they live near or in bodies of water with rapid flow, such as the pools at the bottom of waterfalls. It lives a quiet life underwater, eating any food that sinks to the bottom. In other words, the very first ever Dragon-type Pokemon is a bottom feeder. Not something I was expecting when I had first covered it in the Pokemon food chain video, let alone as I dig deeper into more than just a Pokédex, as I had restricted myself for that video, that I find out that it still is just a bottom feeder. So how about we just take a step onto land, dry off a bit, and look at some more Pokemon. There are 3 new Pokemon that are only found during the day here: Phanpy, Donphan, and Skarmory. Starting with Phanpy, which are in half the numbers of the Donphan, it has a small trunk that is sensitive yet strong. It can send a person flying with an affectionate, playful little bump of its snout, and the trunk is also strong enough to shatter any arm bones it hits. Additionally, this Pokemon is easily capable of carrying an adult human on its back. Mind you, this thing is just under 2 feet tall and is sitting at 73 pounds for its weight. That is some immense amounts of power in such a tiny little package. It is found in rocky terrain, and to make its nest, it digs a vertical pit near the edge of a river. It displays ownership of this area by marking it with its trunk. In the deserted morning hours, Phanpy uses its trunk to shower in the river. Sometimes groups of this Pokemon form and soak each other thoroughly. Afterwards, it can be seen drying its body near the edge of the river, and it will not settle down until it is clean. A little bit of a germaphobe. To follow, we have its parent, Donphan. It has the ability to curl up into a ball and violently roll around like a wheel. These rolling tackles are strong enough to knock down a house. Why do they always have to ruin houses? Don't get a mortgage in the Pokemon world, it's a trap. While normally calm, it can become enraged and start a rampage. Once it starts, it is impossible to stop. It will chase after anyone who angers it. It even uses its rolling ability as a form of courtship. This is done by the male Donphan, having rolling competitions to demonstrate their toughness to females. Cause you know you gotta be a tough male to really woo the ladies. Now, speaking of toughness though, its height is so strong that not even a car can scratch it, which is really weird to think like, oh, it's a car trying to scratch something. I get it, it's just slamming into the Donphan, I guess. Who tested that? Who, actually, you know what, now that I think about it, there's probably a lot of Donphan rolling about. They went across a road and then boom, yeah, that's probably what happened. Despite all of this though, it is vulnerable to rain. It also does have a keen sense of smell, travels with herds in ranking system by how large its tusks are, and it lives in rough, mountainous terrain. Obviously, it makes sense, similar to Phanpy. And I kind of half imagine like those videos where people just flip over or tip over a porta potty, but instead it's Donphan with a house. Just boom, just a prank, bro. Now, easy enough, they are elephants, so they're herbivorous, and those tusks are for digging up roots or scraping bark. I was asked at one point why I say roots instead of roots. No reason, it's just a natural. I say roof, I don't say roof. I say hammock, not hammock. I say curtains, not curtains. I don't know, it's just an accent thing, I guess, and it's just, I don't know, it's just been a lifelong thing. It's not even a southern thing, to my knowledge. It's just a general American accent thing, I don't know. Up next, though, we have Skarmory. With hollow wings, it can travel up to 185 miles per hour or 300 kilometers an hour. Those same steel wings become tattered and bashed from repeated battles, but once a year, the battered wings grow back completely. This process restores the cutting edges of its feathers, which are sharp enough to be used as blades, and they are sharper than any man-made sword. So they're stronger than any material that we'd find on the planet, somehow. Its skin and feathers are solid due to being raised in very harsh conditions. Its nests are usually found in thorn bushes, where continual scratching of a young individual's skin will eventually harden it into an iron-like state. However, water can cause Skarmory's hard body to rust very easily, so it stays in its nest on rainy days. In ancient regions where these Pokemon are common, warriors would use the sharp feathers that fell off Skarmory as swords. The part on the bush, or like the whole like living inside of a very thorny bush, I thought was actually incredibly cool to learn. It's something I did not know before. Maybe we could have had like a baby form of Skarmory at some point that just wasn't a steel type yet. Maybe it was just like a rock type, not even rock flying, you know, just let it be a rock. I guess, I mean, how many rock flying types are there? Now, I think when we look at its beak shape, and the fact that it like gets into so many battles, it really shows us that this bad boy is a carnivore through and through. But let's do our due diligence and get into the specifics of it, because it does have some basis in the Andean Condor, which according to Andean Condor under the Peregrine Fund states, Andean condors generally feed on large carrions, such as the remains of deer, cow, sheep, and the like. Though they will eat smaller animals when they can find them. Usually, several condors gather at a single carcass. So we can safely assume that Skarmory is both a carnivore and a carrion feeder. Throughout all times of day, as we step away from Skarmory, we see Geodude, Graveler, Teddiursa, and our last newbie of this route, Gligar. It feeds on berries and can emit sound waves to detect obstacles and fly around them. It glides smoothly and silently through the air with its limbs extended and startles its prey and enemies by flying straight toward them. Yeah, I'd be terrified too if, it's like a 2.5 foot size purple monster just starts flying at me and its stinger is ready as it's ready to face hug me. Yeah, I'd be startled also. It attacks by clamping onto its enemy's face with its clawed hind legs and pincers, then jabbing it with its poisonous stinger. I just imagine Roberto from Futurama. You know, that whole thing. Now, Gligar itself is resistant to opponents' venom. It lives in mountainous regions, making its nest along cliff sides. I thought of the bird again. Oh no, I'm a terrible human being. When it is done gliding, it hops along the ground back to its nest, so we basically have an omnivore on our hands, and this all makes this route very interesting to me. Now, we do have Geodude and Graveler, and they get to do their thing free of charge. No meat, no blood, no fuss from other Pokemon. Meanwhile, we have the Teddiursa and Phanpy roaming around. The Donphan trying to keep close eye of their children as they know of the terrors in the area. When these two young Pokemon wander far enough on their own, they run into some predators. Gligar swoops in and can quickly dispatch the Teddiursa, making it a quick meal. But unfortunately, when it attacks a Phanpy, that trunk can shatter arm bones. If we assume the best, then this Gligar never stood a chance and is smashed while still on Phanpy's face. Then, if it's not the best case scenario, that Phanpy is still very much strong enough to grab that Gligar, probably by its tail, lift it off. It is a ground type resistant to poison, and just boom, 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 slam it around like Hulk or Broly or whoever else until Phanpy's raw strength just cracks Gligar's shell and it's gone on the ground. And Phanpy's not going to eat that. No, that's carrying for Skarmory later on. The Donphan then, not approvingly, proud of their tough child. And then, unfortunately though, the Phanpy has to quickly take cover as that Skarmory I mentioned now looms overhead on the rare occasion. This bird, large and powerful, fears none of the creatures below it. In fact, it happily takes on more battle scars as it knows none of them will be permanent. Only the Donphan are able to retaliate, and even then it is a tough battle. Afterwards, any other spare rogue Skarmory may fly in and clean up whatever mess is left behind by either side. Otherwise, we can find Teddiursa and the Skarmory frequenting the water areas, grabbing Magikarp. Though this would make Teddiursa an even easier target, unfortunately. And finally, any further scraps are just picked up by our ever-elusive Mirage Pokemon Dratini, who moves quick and is so hard to find that even humans considered it a myth for nearly a decade. Route 46. A way home that runs from the base of the mountains to the plains. There's nothing really to talk about here. We have Rattata, Spearow, Jigglypuff, Geodude, and Phanpy. And these Phanpy are a rare encounter, so they clearly just wandered too far from the previous route. Once again, though, I just kind of imagine that, you know, if something did attack Phanpy, it's just going to playfully smash the life out of any given Pokemon that dares cross its path here. Finally, though, we do get to the other side of Dark Cave. It is very similar to what we talked about earlier. Goldeen, Seaking, and Magikarp are in the water, while Zubat, Golbat, Geodude, Graveler, and Teddiursa are in the cave. Though Mama Bear is here, and now we have Ursaring. We did talk about it a little bit, but let's cover some extra info for fun. It lives in mountainous forests, sleeping in treetops and gathering food throughout the day. While it is skilled at climbing trees, it gathers food by snapping them and collecting whatever berries or fruits fall down. It doesn't say the, the tree branches. No, it just snaps the trees, apparently. That's terrifying. Now, it will mark trees bearing delicious fruit in its territory with its claws. It regularly eats its favorite food, honey, and it can use its sense of smell to distinguish any aroma, allowing it to find food buried deep underground or in streams. It will also search for food during the winter season. It is highly protective of its cubs, is more aggressive during mating season, or more ferocious when hungry, gets a little hangry. And it gets into fights with Primeape when they encounter each other while searching for berries. You know, normal bear stuff. They're only found during the day. The only other new Pokemon found here is actually found only at night. Wobbuffet. It is very protective of its tail to the point where it will suddenly turn uncharacteristically aggressive if the tail is attacked. Though outside of these occasions, it is usually a docile Pokemon that will never attack first. However, when it is attacked, this punching bag will inflate its body and initiate a counter-strike. When two or more of this Pokemon meet, they will attempt to outlast each other in a battle of endurance. However, though, since neither of them can actually attack first, they may compete to see who can go the longest without food. Because of its overprotective nature regarding its tail and hatred of light, it lives in dark caves. It even keeps its tail hidden while it sleeps, though it may drop its guard and expose said tail completely by accident. So it is an obligate herbivore, assumedly, and despite having buffet in its name, it goes on hunger strike competitions against its own kind. Got it. Wonder what a Mega Wobbuffet would be like. Just completely turn it around on its head, give it no defense, all-out attack, just make it a monster, and see what happens. That just sounds fun. Now, this cave basically just serves as a nice place for Ursaring to go inside and feed itself and its young. The bats, of course, will try to feed, but get crushed by Ursaring, which explains the Golbat population. And on occasion, you might just hear a massive boom as someone gets a little too aggressive and decides to try and attack Wobbuffet, who will just counter with more power. Route 47, a road on a cliff that strikes fear in the hearts of those who dare to pass. Only occurring in Heart Gold Soul Silver. Surprisingly enough, though, we don't get any new Pokemon with one exception, as we have during the day Farfetch'd, at night there's Noctowl, during all times we get Eradicate, Spearow, Fearow, Gloom, Miltank, and Ditto at 41% somehow! I don't get it. But whatever, I'm not gonna go on my tirade, I'm not gonna do it, I have self-control. Then, as we look at the water at all times, we get Tentacool, Tentacruel, Seal, Staryu, Shelter, Chinchou, and I'm going to break the rules, as while we don't have the Super Rod, it is completely within level range thanks to Ditto! Lantern. Inside its orbs are bacteria that produce light by absorbing Lantern's bodily fluids. It lures prey using the glow, then blinds them by using an intense flash before it swallows them whole. The flash it creates is visible on the surface from a depth of over 3 miles, 5 kilometers away. This has earned it the name the Deep Sea Star. I just kind of genuinely imagine, once again, a full rave in the ocean when these Pokemon gather. Maybe they and Starmie just... I would put the actual song there, but I know for a fact that's going to get me a copyright claim, so hopefully that doesn't. Now, it competed with Luminion when it catches its prey Starmie, and it inhabits the depths of the ocean. So while Luminion isn't here, we now have direct confirmation that it at least preys on Starmie, not just Staryu. And, I mean, we already kind of confirmed that Chinchu's just gonna kind of eat whatever comes its way based on its origins. So, in reality, the only new interactions we have here are Fearow eating Gloom, Farfetch'd, Miltank, and maybe Noctowl at night. And I know saying Fearow trying to go after a cow is kind of bold, but it's got the power, I'm pretty sure. Unless that Miltank nose roll out, and then in which case we relive our nightmare. Or at least you relive your nightmare of Whitney. I never had a problem with Whitney, just get good. Now, I say that as I'm, like, mediocre in Nuzlocke. Now, Seal is also still here, being the monster it is and trying to eat everything, only for a Tentacool and Chinchou to evolve due to the pressure. And I'll just say it now. Lantern is going to be top dog in the water, as it'll just flashbang the entire water area and then gulp down its prey. Though I am sure that Tentacruel does get a chance, as it may just be partially a matter on who gets that first strike, because Tentacruel is pretty freaking strong, and it's got 80 tentacles. You know, if it really wants to, it could just windmill with 80 tentacles, and it'll probably be fine. Cliff Cave, the cave that I missed as I was nearing the end of this entire script and had to, whip myself back around, turn around, and re-script this part, pick it up, and actually talk about it, because it's such a small area that does appear only in Heart Gold Soul Silver, and in which, you know, I would have ignored it. I would have been like, you know what, I don't care. It is not relevant. I'm just going to ignore it. Who else is going to remember it? Well, it's important, because during the day, we see Graveler, Wooper, and Quagsire. At night, we see Zubat, Golbat, and Mischievous, which Mischievous lives in caves and is a nocturnal Pokemon. It spends its days sleeping in darkness and its nights startling people with mischievous tricks. Haha, mischievous. Since it loves watching frightened people, it is known to yank and bite at people's hair, or sneak up on them and cry and shriek in a way a child would. It uses its hair to grasp objects and other Pokemon. It uses the fear of others as its own form of nutrition. So, it'll just keep scaring Pokemon as it needs to, and if you want to learn all about this Pokemon, the nitty-gritty origins, what it's based on, so much more, including Mischievous and so many more, go check out my video, Every Ghost Pokemon Explained. I'm very happy with that, as it was very fun to learn about a lot of yokai, and I give my own opinions on every ghost-type Pokemon so far. Moving on, though, we at all times see Golbat, Machop, Machoke, Geodude, Krabby, Kingler, Onix, and with a 2% chance, I never knew about this one, Steelix. It burrows up to 0.6 of a mile underground and can be found in mountains or caves, which, mind you, most of our mines in the modern age go deeper than that. Just flexing on a Pokemon, you know? It can dig even towards the world's core, which you're not making it anywhere clear or close to that, and so I don't know why you even care, why we even give that any level of care, but whatever. I'm just, you know, it's over-exaggerated, you know, it's over-exaggerated. Steelix gets more credit than it deserves. It's a cool Pokemon, but you know what? It doesn't dig that far. Just saying. It easily chews through boulders with its powerful jaws, and its eyes are capable of seeing in the dark. Exposure to underground heat and pressures alongside its iron-rich soil diet has made its body harder than diamonds. It is said to have been the result of an Onix's composition becoming more diamond-like after living about 100 years. It is known to sleep in an upright position, somehow always maintaining this superb balance without even toppling over. Honestly, there's not much of a picture to paint here, because no one's going to bother Onix, no one's going to bother Steelix, no one's eating Mischievous. Mischievous is not eating anybody, it's just taking, you know, fear and negative emotion, so let's just move up and move out. And up next, we actually have our final route. But we will have more to talk about, of course, more locations to talk about, especially as the next one isn't much to consider, and I gotta end on a high note. Route 48, a pleasant path from the base of the mountain to the Safari Zone. This also only exists in Pokemon Heart Gold, Soul Silver. So real quick, we have Fearow, Vulpix, Gloom, Diglett, Growlithe, Farfetch'd, Tauros, Hoppip, and Girafarig. This route does jumble things up a bunch, as we can pretty much find all these Pokemon during all times of day between the two games, so it muddles things up quite a bit. Despite this, we already know the dietary habits of all of them. The only real new bit is the conflict between Fearow and Growlithe or Vulpix, as they can fight back, but they are not always going to win, in regards to Growlithe and Vulpix trying to defend themselves. I'll glance over a few more spots without new info so we can get to the juicy finale a little bit faster, because as we look into Tojo Falls, the Tojo waterfall that links the Kanto and Johto regions, it is not very impressive in terms of ecology either. We see Raticate, Zubat, Golbat, Slowpoke, then Goldeen, Seaking, and Magikarp, all of which we have seen interact with each other or know how their relationships pretty much play out. And from here, the routes just get a little screwy in terms of which comes next, so bear with me. Route 27, a road that crosses from Johto to the Kanto region, like a new journey. It's finally here. You're past Tojo Falls and on your way to challenge the Elite Four. Here, during the day, we find Arbok, a small population of Ponyta, Doduo in large numbers, and we get to see the three-headed mon itself, Dodrio. Each head has its own working brain and distinct personality. Each head represents and expresses either sorrow, anger, or joy. Despite being separate, it has the innate ability to use all three of its brains to collect data, formulate, and then execute complex plans and strategies. However, on occasion, it may overthink, which causes it to become immobilized and unable to carry out any action whatsoever. Me too, Dodrio. Me too. Being separate individuals on the same body, the three heads will continue to bicker until they, or at least one of them, gets to eat. This satisfies the other two heads, quelling them and temporarily ending their fighting. The strongest of Dodrio's heads and the thickest neck will become the leader and gain primary control of the body. That's kind of messed up, knowing that they'll like fight over the same body. That's some horror stuff. Just a little bit of horror right there. Another form of adaptation that it has acquired is the ability to have at least one head alert at all times. Extreme caution is advised when all three heads are facing separate directions. It is in this state that it is the most dangerous, and going anywhere near it will result in severe pecking, so do not go near it. It is basically in its alert stance. Along with its three heads, it has 3 sets of hearts and lungs as well, which makes it sound like it has 6 hearts. And the Pokédex says pretty much exactly that in 2 entries. So, I mean, while I want to doubt it, because it would be really funny to imagine Dodrio like Zim in the Oregon Harvest episode. It's a really messed up episode. It's actually quite possible, because this would allow it to efficiently oxygenate and pump blood throughout its body, thus giving it increased endurance to run vast distances without rest, which is what information states. It is especially prone to race vigorously across grassy plains, even in arid regions or seasons with little rainfall. As a result, despite being slower than Doduo, Dodrio can keep running for an even longer time. It sleeps while standing up, with the heads taking turns to scout, but even when incredibly tired, that last head will likely doze off. So, I mean, the lifestyle supports the idea of it actually having 6 hearts in addition to the, for sure, 6 lungs, which is kind of insane, but little to no rest does put a lot of strain on the heart, so having those extra hearts would be really good. It's also incredibly good because it'd be, it'd be good for making sure you have oxygen in your body, make sure that lactic acid is being broken up, blood is continuing to pump, adrenaline, oxygen, so that way you can stay in a heightened state of mind. All good stuff, right? All really good stuff. Also, did you know that while humans can't really run as fast as most creatures, we can run longer, and it's all because of our gluteus maximus. After all, it's not just for looks. I mean, most attractions are derived from innate instinct to want someone else
who will survive better naturally, or at least meets requirements for survival that we don't. Opposites attract for a reason. But back to Pokemon. We already stated that Doduo would eat basically anything smaller than it in the Kanto region, so Dodrio would only be a fiercer and more willing version of that will strike at those that have tried to prey upon it before it evolved, now basically getting its revenge. At night, we see Noctowl and Quagsire in mass for both, and at all times we get to see Raticate and Sandslash. And in the water we see Tentacool, Tentacruel, Magikarp, Shelter, Chinchou, and Lantern. So why don't we paint a bit of a picture, shall we? This area is constantly traveled through, and that has shaped it to be harsher. The only first 4 Pokemon we see on land are fast. Ponyta, rapidly bursting through the area. They separated from their group in the next areas and are looking to turn back after reaching the water. And as long as they move, they should be safe from a sudden Raticate swarm. The Raticate move in large numbers, having been subjected as Rattata far too often to the predators who would eat them here. Arbok, Sandslash, Doduo, Noctowl, and Quagsire. Honestly, the area is full of evolved Pokemon because they all will prey upon each other given the chance. Arbok would strike down Sandshrew too often, so now we have Sandslash. Hoot would have eggs eaten too often, so Noctowl only resides here. Wooper would have been eaten time and time again by them all, so now we have Quagsire. It helps explain why they're all here in such large numbers as part of their evolutions. They have faced hardship after hardship and were forced to stay in top shape or be eaten. Even as we look at Doduo, it's fast, but you can't run forever. So they're lucky to be in very high numbers, and very few evolve to become Dodrio, which could potentially take on and prey upon the threats here. It's only until we look at the water are we even relatively peaceful by comparison, assuming all the aforementioned Pokemon don't aggressively fish for these water-based Pokemon, though I know Dodrio would. I would say more about the water, but it is as it always was and hasn't really changed. And Lantern getting caught by anything on land won't happen because it is a deep sea Pokemon that will normally not come to the surface at all and is willing to eat anything it comes across. So just expect a nice flashbang every once in a while from these waters. Moving on, the next route is pretty much the exact same. As we look at Route 26, an unimaginably difficult mountain road that gives the impression of a test. As such, we have one more route before we get past the Elite Four and onto the challenge of a lifetime. Route 28. A vacant and hidden mountain road that continues to Mount Silver. Pokemon here include, in the water, Poliwag, Poliwhirl, and Magikarp. On land, we have during the day, Ponyta, Rapidash, Doduo, and Dodrio. At night, we have Sneasel, Poliwhirl, Golbat, and during all times, there are Tangela, Ursaring, and Donphan. All Pokemon we have talked about, but an interesting array nevertheless. Those in highest population are Ponyta and Rapidash, which makes sense as this is their preferred environment. They continue to graze in open fields as they are apt to do. They might try eating some Tangela even, or at least its vines since we don't really know what's underneath. And then we look at Ursaring, who likely won't bother anyone else unless it feels the need to. There are plenty of fish to eat and few threats to its den. But I said few threats, not no threats. Because we see slithering through the grass an Arbok, large and foreboding. It will try to sink its teeth into all of the Pokemon here. They are in small numbers though, as their plans are thwarted often, being ripped apart by Ursaring, Donphan, and maybe even Dodrio, as its hearts can help it withstand more poison, assuming it has the liver and kidney power to filter that much blood constantly, freeing it of the poison. As night falls, expecting families of Pokemon rest. But Rapidash hears a rustling in the bushes nearby. Knowing the dangers that lurk due to the previous Arbok attack, it rushes ahead and prepares to burn the bush and whatever predator dares draw near. As it does, it watches a Sneasel run away as fast as it can. Luckily, these horses stay together as a group because as this Rapidash turns around, it sees another Sneasel that is much closer to the Rapidash eggs. But it is surrounded by all the other Rapidash. In moments, it will be burned for trying to break into their eggs to drink away their offspring. The Sneasel that got away continues running, realizing the jig is up, only to be swooped upon by a Golbat. Taken by surprise, the Sneasel tries to escape, and the Golbat grows fat from feeding. It then takes a nap. A stray Poliwhirl then waddles on by, trying to stay away from all the commotion, only for a Tangela to pull it into the brush to never be seen again. A fate that Poliwag and Magikarp are often subject to. I might have taken some liberties with that whole description, but at the same time, I feel like it's very much possible. Victory Road in this generation is pretty much the same as the previous one, except it has less, unfortunately. We do get Rhyhorn and Rhydon there, and the both of them really just create tunnels, sticking to themselves, destroying things along the way, but they don't really hunt anything. They can assumedly be eating rocks or anything else along those lines, and Rhyhorn... Sorry. Rhydon, I always mix those two up. Rhydon, now standing on its back legs, is able to burrow further and expand its territory. I want to give them a little bit more love, so I'm just going to kind of weirdly omit Victory Road here, because I think we'll have a better version in the future regarding Rhyhorn and Rhydon, and their effect or others' effect on them in ecosystems. As for Cerulean Cave, I didn't include Cerulean Cave as there are multiple hints that it might be man-made. While there are Rhyhorn and Rhydon there that also do some digging, it says things other caves haven't. It says that it seems that it was cut out of the mountain and that the Pokemon League does manage the cave. So, I will leave it up to you. If you really truly feel like I should cover Cerulean Cave, maybe I'll cover it and the Sevi Islands together or something. These things get very messy, and so let's finish off these lands. Mount Silver, a hallowed mountain that rises between the Johto and Kanto regions. Funny enough, the immediate outside of Mount Silver is exactly the same as the previous route that we had mentioned, mainly because it is on Route 28. So past the threshold, and let's rise to the top floor, floor by floor. Mount Silver Cave, and who better to greet us on this last stretch than Quagsire in that picture, which, even just thinking about it, I know when I first saw it, it made me giggle. Here we find friends new and old. During the day, we see Magmar, Ursaring, and Larvitar. It is born deep underground, far from its parents. It emerges to the surface and grows by consuming soil. It will enter its pupal stage upon eating an entire mountain's worth of earth. Larvitar usually lives in mountains, hills, and caves. It adapts poorly to bright lights. I wonder why, after you're just in the dark all the time. And sometimes it falls asleep right after filling its stomach with soil, so it can be found actually holding said soil while it sleeps, which is really cute. They come in at a rare 5% chance. It can tunnel incredibly well and is a reptile of sorts. I mean, it's like a dinosaur kaiju thing, so duh. And we can try to keep that in mind when it comes to possible predators. At night, we get Golduck, and at all times, we see Golbat, though there are only a few of them during the day. They're primarily here at night. We also get Graveler, Onix, and Donphan. This might be one of the few times where I can actually say that Graveler and Onix have a potential predator. I am confident that Larvitar would at least try to eat them, though this may not be successful, and even if it is, what's probably happening is Onix is sitting there going, this is not worth the fight, I am not dealing with you, I'm not even acknowledging you, just take that segment of my tail, I can grow it back super easily, so there you go. It doesn't want to waste the energy, and Larvitar gets a meal. And Larvitar isn't exactly done tunneling through the mountain, so we'll see it later. Donphan gets to dig up plenty of roots here, and is a big reason why the ground is stamped down and treaded. Golduck seems to wander in here more than anything from higher levels, and unlucky for it, it may run into some Ursaring while it is already in a rampage and fighting off a Magmar, which are only found on this level. Probably because it's warmer, and this might be a little bit of a, or used to be an active volcano. And what more could we really say about Golbat? It just seeks blood after all, so let's go up a level. Floor 2. This is the real meat of Mount Silver in terms of a more interactive ecosystem. During the day, we see Machoke and Larvitar. At night, we see Golduck and Mischievous. At all times, we get Quagsire in large numbers.
Ursaring, Donphan, Golbat also in large numbers, and finally Parasect. The insect has been drained of nutrients and is now under the full control of the fully grown Tochukaso mushroom. Removing the mushroom will cause Parasect to stop moving. It can thrive in dark forests with a suitable amount of humidity for growing fungi. The swarm will drain the tree nutrients until it dies and then move on to a new tree. So you might be asking, why is it here in this cave then? There are trees all over this mountain, after all, assumedly. So those roots have to go somewhere. And we might even be able to assume that it has less predators here, allowing Parasect easier meals and easy humidity from the heat below and the snow melt above, dripping from the higher floors down here to allow it to live in its most ideal conditions with little to no threat. In the water, we have Golduck, Goldeen, Seaking, and Magikarp. And so, while we do have the next floor being the summit where we do get to see a lovely Pupitar, there's nothing really special to talk about when it comes to them. Let's just say what it is. It doesn't eat. It lets steam off because it can't move, and it's very frustrated about that, by venting out actual steam from its body, which can blast it basically like a rocket and cause incredible amounts of damage, toppling a building over and everything. Of course, it can top a building over. And honestly, this might just inadvertently cause a collapse of the cave in some parts on top of other Pokemon, so that's a little bit horrifying. So, with that out of the way, let's paint our final picture of Johto. The sun rises. The Parasect never truly sleep, driven by the mushrooms on their back until the body decays into nothingness, and those mushrooms can spread their spores further. They simply feed on roots, day and night, until disturbed. And oh, do they get disturbed. Because Golbat is in dire need of a meal. The Ursaring in the area are far too strong when they are awake and bat down Golbats with ease. So these bats strike at Parasect in desperation. One might wonder if these spores will cause any long-term harm to Golbat, but Golbat doesn't care. Its body now filled with a fungal blood that it drained Parasect of completely. Golbat, now having the same questionable blood type as Parasect, it, now full, decides to take a nap on the ground, immobile. The air is moist and cool, perfect for a giant salamander to go for a walk in. And go for a walk Quagsire does. It passes by Machoke, who is completing their daily training with Donphan, offering it roots in trade for a challenge of toughness. Eventually, Quagsire gets tired and lays down, only to realize it laid itself down next to the filled to the brim Golbat. Well, who is Quagsire to say no to such an easy meal? It swallows the Golbat whole before it can have time to wake up and resist. As day turns to night, that Quagsire sees less of its friends walking around. The waters may be cooler at this time of night, so it absent-mindedly walks, thinking of Goldeen and Magikarp to eat, maybe a Seaking if it's lucky and the Golduck don't get all the fish first. Then, a shriek rings out beside Quagsire. It pauses, and then its mouth slowly opens in a delayed reaction of surprise and shock. Fear sets in, and it runs away. Little did it know the fear was just another meal for the mischievous that reside within the cave and love to scare the unaware salamander as its primary source of food. So, with that, we finish our trek of Johto and reach the top. Red awaits. But that is a story for another day. I have to admit, even though it's in the thumbnail, I found it really odd that I could not find Houndour and Houndoom, naturally in the Johto region, as they're only found in the Safari Zone here. It's okay, though. We'll get to them when we make it to Kalos. Ooh, that's a long ways away. But speaking of Kalos, in preparation for Legends ZA, the next video I am working on, which is already halfway scripted, is the video covering every single Mega Pokemon so far. And I have a nice Jujutsu Kaisen reference for the thumbnail that I'm very happy for. I might just throw it on screen now. So, if you enjoyed this video, leave some comments, share the video, subscribe, and even become a member of the channel for as little as $3 a month. Any and all forms of support are greatly appreciated. And, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't do anything I want to do. Don't do anything I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye!